Alrighty, so I'm here doing my Matt Walsh cosplay to discuss discuss a very vicious and, dare I say, venomous, vitriolic post response to somebody to my personal video on one-to-one time. It was the first major video that I did. Who do we got in the chat tonight? I'll make sure that we got all the fixins ready here. Let's see here. The Dorito Pope Show is wrapping up soon, so you're very much aiming at a good time to stream. That's good news. So, has anybody here read the Rube Bomber Manifesto as of yet? This thing by a fellow by the name of David Guile. There we go. Dorito Pope Show. It's told that there would be no homework. That's okay, you actually don't have to do any homework for this particular show. This is going to be pretty simple. We're just going to read somebody's vitriol, somebody's line by line, almost line by line. I gotta lead off by saying that the dedication of this person to write almost 7,900 words, laying out exactly what they, don't get me wrong, the 7,900 words still comes out to roughly nuh-uh in response to most of the points that I make in this video, and just kind of like brushes past the fact that I address all of his objections within the past, I'm going to say, what is that? From 1248 to 1610 in my lovely one-to-one time video. So, it still boils down to nuh-uh, but just the fact that he wrote almost 8,000 words has, to my mind, raised the bar when it comes to the different... when it comes to the critics that I have to deal with on a regular basis. So if somebody's going to, for instance, recently, just kind of move the goalposts every time we have a discussion, if they're just going to say nuh-uh, if they're going to backtrack the conversation to earlier points that have already been addressed, if they're going to say that I can't make multiple points supporting a single given argument, I'm going to require them to give me at least 7,000 words, and this should help get rid of some of the riffraff that I've been dealing with as of late, and really for the past year, because it's annoying to put a lot of effort into explaining something like, for instance, a one-to-one time, and its benefits, and to lay out a whole video structure about why it's good, and somebody just kind of responds with, well, Gary only said that it's best. And he only said that strict timekeeping records need to be maintained for a meaningful campaign in all caps. And he didn't say that one-to-one time was the rule, he only said it was best. And every single RPG around the time had some variation of real-world tied timekeeping, whether it was 1-to-1, whether it was 1-to-5, whether it was 1-to-7. I think 1-to-5 was Tunnels and Trolls. I think 1-to-7 was the James Bond RPG, and there's some other spy-focused RPG that I'm thinking of. So if somebody's going to throw like the tired, stupid people, just kind of like our cookies on the bottom shelf objections, then I need them to do it with the fervor and I don't know. I think only a stupid person could write this much of this venomously, and this much. It's the quantity that I'm going to be praising here. So I guess we should start off. Let's see. Alright, so this person begins by saying that the bros are a gaggle of pretentious hobby tourists that consider elf games to be some sort of lifestyle brand that you can win at. They also like to accuse people of playing first edition Advanced Dungeons & Dragons incorrectly, all because An attention-starved narcissist misread a recommendation, declared that obviously no one else in gaming history was even aware of it, and his simple-minded sycophants couldn't be bothered to pull his dick out of their mouth long enough to double-check that he wasn't making it all up. And Gelatinous Rube is one such bro. He spelled my name right here. I'm impressed. This is unfortunate. Listen, this could happen to anybody. All right? Even in the title. I don't want anybody to make fun of him for this. Gelatinous Rube. I believe that's Baldur's Gate 3 character. So already we have a weird contradiction here where I'm simultaneously a hobby tourist. I'm here just kind of on a summer vacation. I'm not really invested in the hobby. I'm not paying attention to the hobby and the things that are important to it. But at the same time, I'm also engaging with the one piece of literature that everybody universally decries as being too complex, too technical, too advanced, too college level for people to follow accurately. So it's a little, I'm sorry. I don't know. I don't know if you could be a hobby tourist and somebody who wants to really win at something. It doesn't quite stick. Bad rhetoric. Let's see here. The name works on multiple levels. See, a gelatinous cube lurks in dungeons, feeding off waste and other scraps. It's only particularly dangerous if it catches you by surprise. But if you notice it, it's pretty easy to deal with due to its slow speed, ponderous size, and unsophisticated hunting strategy. Rube speaks for itself, especially given that gelatinous cubes have an intelligence of 0. Of course, for Mr. Rube, that's still quite generous. I don't know if this guy knows this, but Gelatinous Rube is not my real name. I chose the phrase Gelatinous Rube to be an asshole. Like, I chose this to be a jerk because the country bumpkin accent and gelatinous cube with a cowboy hat is so delightful to just put people at ease and make it a little easier to respond to unhinged criticisms like the aforementioned here. I had no plans to respond to it, but a few months ago someone on Twitter brought up kinda sorta arbitrary one-to-one timekeeping, and Rube shuffled in and, in a flagrant disregard for anything resembling intelligence, bothered to link the video, suffering from the woefully misguided delusion that it would in any way serve to support his misguided belief that only he and the rest of the Bro-SR tourists are playing a nearly 50-year-old game, not the way Gary intended, but ostensibly by the rules as written. That's half true. I definitely love dropping this video down because I made it to be pretty comprehensive, and it is comprehensive. I have not come across a single objection that has not been addressed in this video so far. And that was he did a separate blog post on this. Let's see here. It would be accurate to say they're playing the game in a specific manner that they think is the one true way, and will condescendingly tell you that, yeah, you can keep playing the game wrong if you want, even though based on Rube's statements, they aren't necessarily playing it right, at least no more correctly than most. This is so boring, like, there's no right way to play, there's no good ways of playing, there's no bad ways of playing. Nobody cares about this, okay? I'm sorry. Like, everybody's been doing, your mileage may vary for the past 50 years. Nobody gives a damn about that. Who cares? That's boring. That's out of style. I should note that the video is 18 minutes longer than it has any right to be. This is true. I gave the definition in the first minute, and I would prefer if people just followed the instructions of the rule, but sadly people do bring up a lot of objections, and they're really confused as to how it gets used and how it's supposed to come up in play or impact the game in play. So I just decided to give a bunch of supporting arguments so that people could connect and sympathize with the rule as it would be applied to their individual game and their individual circumstances. And maybe that was a waste. Clearly it didn't affect this guy in the intended fashion. All right, he already at the first line, we're pausing. Howdy, folks. I'm here to tell you that the way time works in your tabletop campaigns is wrong. What Rube means to say is that he thinks the way that you play is wrong. Yes, I understand. nobody's confused about this. I'm not talking about calendars or short and long rests, except he is talking about calendars, albeit in a roundabout way. I mean, yes, I'm talking about the real world calendar. I'm not talking about like making a game calendar or making new names for your individual days and months and adjusting that structure. I'm talking about the way time progresses in your game. The way you decide time moves forward in your game is wrong. Yes, we understand that this is supposedly my opinion. Y'all are going to bristle at that, but first I'm going to give y'all a rule, tell you about its benefits, and then we'll get to objections at the end. Rube is going to tell you a recommendation and pretend that it's a rule. Oh boy, here we go. Here we go. All right, so there's a lovely little passage on page 37 of the AD&D Dungeon Master's Guide. It says, for the sake of example, let's assume that you begin your campaign on day 1 of the year 1000. There are 4 player characters who begin initially, and they have adventures which last a total of 50 days, 6 days of actual adventuring and 44 days of resting and other activity. At this point in time, 2 new players join the game. One of the original group decides to go seek the advice of an oracle after hiring an elven henchman, and the remaining 3 old boys decide they will not go with the newcomers. So on day 51, player A's character is off on a journey. Those of B, C, and D are resting on their laurels, and E and F enter the dungeon. The latter pairs spend the better part of the day surviving, but do well enough to rest a couple of game days and return for another try on day 54, where they stumble upon the worst monster on the first level, surprise it, and manage to slay it and come out with a handsome treasure. You pack it in for the night. 4 actual days later, and it is best to use 1 actual day equals 1 game day when no play is happening. On day 55, player characters B, C, and D enter the dungeon and find that the area they selected has already been cleared out by player characters E and F. So, E and F do 4 days of adventuring. They clear out the dungeon on day 54. Or sorry, no, they do, wait, on day 51. Okay, so they do 3 days of adventuring, depending on whether or not you count day 51. They clear out that part of the dungeon, and on day 55, which is 4 actual days later, the other player characters enter the dungeon and find that the area they selected has already been cleared out by player characters E and F. Had they come the day after the previous game session, day 52, and done the same thing, they would have found the monster and possibly gotten the goodies. What to do about that? What to do about... Oh, and what about old A and his pointy-eared chum off to see the Oracle? This is not... Now, this is outlined. This is in the same book saying that strict timekeeping methods are critical to a meaningful campaign. They're in all caps. It's a clarification of the OD&D rules, which also told you to use 1 actual day for 1 game day. Or that 1 actual day would progress your calendar 1 day in game. But this is, according to David Guile, says this is not a rule. It is at best merely a recommendation. At best, merely a recommendation. Man, I think that, like, it is best to use 1 actual day equals 1 game day. I think that you could make a case that this isn't a rule. I don't think that it is at best a recommendation. I think that is... Worst case scenario, this just is a recommendation. There's no recommendation. There's nothing structured like, it is best to do X thing. That is not a recommendation. It just is. It's something I am at the least, okay, this is a little weird. The Dying Breed, he means Dying Breed Tabletop, have tried to explain to Rube and other Broasar buffoons. Dying Breed Tabletop, unfortunately, his wife said that we could not debate and that he had to block me or else, I don't know, divorce would follow. So very unfortunate. I've since received many Morse code flashlights at my window. I've received a few messages in a bottle. I don't know how he got those to White Rock Lake, but it was very clever. He is still attempting to coordinate a debate with me. under the radar of his wife, but please pray for him and the torturous scenario he currently finds himself in. In fact, the entire section on time in the campaign isn't even a rule, but a series of paragraphs explaining why time should matter, given how it relates to various in-game activities such as trading to level up, which is an incredibly, oh, he uses a bad word here, a bad rule that was wisely relegated to optional status in 2nd edition and removed entirely in 3rd. And a procedure used to enhance it. Okay, so this guy thinks that admits that the really big paragraph is about things that should happen in your game that are they're critically important to keeping a campaign progressing and operating in an ideal fashion, and that it's the best way to do it. It just isn't a rule, merely a recommendation. I feel like you're really giving me a lot of ground here. Let's see here. Timekeeping isn't put in as a rule, but a lack of timekeeping / time as a resource breaks the game. I'm totally, root cause of the 5-minute adventuring day. I'm totally fine if that's the case. If it's, like, so critical that it's not listed as a rule anywhere, but the rest of the game breaks without it, it's unfortunate that Gary wasn't more specific when he wrote AD&D, but I'm okay with that because I'm just going to give you, I'm just going to give you all the arguments for why it's best to do it this way. Best to use 1 day out of game equals 1 day in game. And then he talks about the time, the bros are tourists desperate for attention and authority, and to invent a procedure for a rule that doesn't exist in order to reinforce their delusions. I mean, so he's referring to something called time jail here, where if somebody goes too far ahead in the in-game calendar, we say, hey, you can't play that character again until the real-life calendar catches up with you. The whole reason we do that is the same reason that when I'm accepting downtime orders, you only get 1 per week, unless you've participated in a session, or when I'm handling patron orders, you only get 1 per month at the moment, because I've set a procedure on a matter for which the rules are silent, on the best way to sort of adjudicate the different events that are happening in-game. So, for instance, I don't have infinite amount of time to adjudicate every single player character doing something every single day. And most of the activities that they're doing aren't going to happen every single day. Most of the downtime activities are specifically for things that take you a while, like going off on a wilderness adventure, or building your castle, or casting spells, researching and crafting scrolls. So that's not stuff that I'm really worried about. It's stuff that you can just remind me, hey, you're doing that. That's something that we would refer to as being a procedure. It's a personal method of adjudication on which the rules are silent and do not forbid. Right? Okay. So first up, we have the rule we call one-to-one time. It states for each day that passes in real life, 1 day passes in-game. Very simple. Go ahead and, let's see here. To the fool you're applying to see this, blame James Ward. He told us about time jail. Also, Frank Metzer told us about time jail. It's something that we did get from the old guys. Dorian the Sleepy says, this is a weird standard. I went through reading rules for AD&D and found it could be described as rolling a rolling set of self-corrections and erratas with each major book release. Yep. Bearded Devil says, in the example, the session described in the beginning lasted 50 game days. When the players meet for next session, it's 4 real days later, and day 54 in-game world. No. No, it isn't. I'm sorry, that's just stupid and wrong. I'm sorry that your reading comprehension is lacking. Nope. I'm sorry, man. Had they come after the day after the previous game session, game day 52, and done the same thing, they would have found the monster and possibly gotten the goodies. It's very clear that a new game session starts on day 51. It is impossibly clear that a new game session starts on day 51. Why would they have specified, why would they have gone to day 54? I'm sorry. No. I'm sorry, this is too stupid. What would even be the point of listing 4 actual days later, and it's best to use 1 actual day equals 1 game day? What would be the point of doing that? You're trying to manipulate language in a way that's completely disconnected from the game, which is what I have to keep dealing with these stupid people. It's ridiculous. 4 actual days later, day 51, 4 actual days later, day 55. Very, very, very simple. Yes, when not playing, so there was a session on day 51, and then there was a session on day 55. Also a session on day 54. Oh, sorry. I'm just gonna... Boop. Just gonna time that guy out. Because I'm really bored with this. I'm sorry that your reading comprehension is suffering. Where were we? This would have been good to know, but Gary didn't even do this. Nobody cares whether Gary did this. It would have been interesting to know why the recommendation is even there in the first place. That's because AD&D is a game. And what the game is for is play that's consistent across tables, that's disconnected from whatever the designer does. I've designed content in the past, and if I've made content in the past that I decide to not... Like I made Airships of Brachus. And if I decide, as the designer, that I'm not going to use a specific rule for the initial approach in combat, that doesn't really have any bearing on the book itself, because I'm not at that person's table. I'm not at another person's game table, but the book is. So we go by what the book says, because that's the thing that is intended to be and is possible to be consistent across tables. Also, I have some notifications here. Give me a second. All right. Let's see here. There isn't any explanation as to why it is even recommended. That's not the case. There's plenty. In the AD&D DMG specifically, I'm going to go to Gelatinous. I fat fingered it. Give me just a moment. This is so boring. You may ask why time is so important if it causes such difficulties with record keeping, dictates who can or cannot go adventuring during a game session, and disperses player characters to the four winds by its strictures. Well, as initially pointed out, it is a necessary penalty imposed upon characters for certain activities. Beyond that, it also gives players yet another interesting set of choices and consequences. The latter tends to bring more true-to-life quality to the game, as some characters will use precious time to the utmost advantage. Some will treat it lightly, and some will be constantly wasting it to their complete detriment. Time is yet another facet, which helps to separate the superior players from the lesser ones. If timekeeping is a must from a penalty standpoint, it is also an interesting addition from the standpoint of running a campaign. To give you the short summary version of that particular paragraph, there's a lot of activities that take different lengths of time, and players who maximize their use of time are going to get specific advantages in the campaign and are also going to produce interesting scenarios for other players. The guy who makes scrolls, the guy who builds a wooden fort or wooden palisade out in the forest, the guy who focuses on repairing keeps and ruins and looks for specific time-focused shortcuts to complete those activities. is going to generate a lot of, those people are going to generate a lot of adventure fodder for other people in the campaign, other people in the player roster. And it's going to take a load off it's going to impart a little bit more work for the referee in terms of adjudicating all these downtime actions between sessions and marking things on the calendar, but it's going to save them a lot of work in terms of setting up interesting adventures for the characters, because the characters are coming up with interesting adventure content on their own, not just for themselves, but for other people in the player roster. So that's kind of the idea. I don't know why that shouldn't have like deleted this guy's messages. It was just supposed to time him out for a little while. Not that it matters. It wasn't anything of value. So going back here. So this guy doesn't play AD&D. He's going to specify later. He's not familiar with the rule set. He doesn't know why we make any recommendations about the rule set we do. He doesn't know why anybody plays AD&D to begin with. So this, I'm not going to harp on him too much more for this particular spot of ignorance. So, the in-game calendar moves forward one day for each day that passes in real life. This is like the 8th time that he's brought up, well, it can do that if you abide by the recommendation, but you don't have to. There's no rules saying that you have to. They just said, Gary just said it's best. Guys, the Bro SR is wrong. Gary only said that it's best to do it this one specific way, and it was critical to running a campaign, and it was that you couldn't run a campaign without it, but it's only a recommendation where he said it's best and critical to keeping the campaign afloat. It's not a rule. The Bro SR is wrong. Okay. If you insist, I'm going to play it anyways, and I'm going to recommend that other people do it too. Something tells me you'd still be upset if I was recommending it to people. If y'all play on Monday, y'all don't get to play again until next Monday. 7 days will have elapsed or progressed in your game. If you play First Edition AD&D and you decide to stick with the recommendation, you can use any ratio at all or none, as there isn't even a rule saying, this guy's like Maddox. This is unbelievable. And next up is a procedure we commonly refer to as time jail. We as in the Bro SR Taurus, so it's not an official rule. It's a procedure. We didn't claim that it was a rule. We've been very clear about this just being a procedure, something that we do, kind of like when my patrons hand me orders for the actions or my player characters hand me orders for their downtime actions, I have them fill out like a little form that tells me what they're doing. That's an example of a procedure. There's no rules stating that they have to do that, but there's no prohibition against it. And so if they want me to adjudicate the downtime actions, I just let them know, hey, this is the best way to guarantee that I'll do it for you, because this is the best way to keep the resolution time on my end small and make sure that I'm attending to everybody in the campaign and not just 3 individual people soaking up my time. So, let's see here. It states that your characters are inaccessible until the real-life calendar catches up to them. If your character spends about 4 weeks training to level up, you've got 4 weeks to play another character until they're available again. Nowhere is this even remotely implied as a standard procedure. It's not. It's a procedure we made. Okay? Rube is saying that you need to time jail your character when training, but not when traveling. I never made that specification. That's stupid. Also not when resting for the night. Also not when waiting a turn 10 minutes after you've been adventuring for 50 minutes. None of this has anything to do with... What are you talking about? What is this idiot talking about? Okay, so one-to-one time, just to refresh everybody's memory, is for if 1 day passes in real life, 1 day passes in-game. There's no reversing that. There's no other time scales that are addressed in that. It's just 1 day in real life, 1 day in-game. 1 day in real life, 1 day in game. Not 1 minute in real life, 1 minute in... Not 1 hour, not one... You get the idea, right? Not 1 second. We're not keeping to 6-second rounds in combat. We're not only letting the rounds take like 6 seconds in real life before we skip over to the next one. That's not how it works. 1 day in real life, 1 day in game. 1 day in real life, 1 day in game. Everything before you pack it in for the night is a description of a single session. Thank you for admitting that day 51 is a separate session. I'm glad that you have amended your earlier error or lack of reading comprehension. Let's see here. So time jail is just for if you here I could just demonstrate this. It's really simple in a way that I was hoping would not be too difficult for people to understand. Ba-da-ba-ba. Oh, you know what? A little bit of ambience. Yeah, I'm always a fan of Kingdoms of Amalur. So if I boot up my simp, if I boot up my simp, if I boot up my simple calendar here, we're gonna go to, where did we start this session? Party enters the world below, that's not it. Oh, there we go. So on the 7th of December, which is today, Mimosa's Caravan, which is a specific party that's out in the wilderness right now, started. They did some travel for a few days and went back and forth, and I believe they stopped somewhere around like day 25 and started hunting. That took them some time. They found some cool stuff, like an 8-legged horse that they decided to ask for directions. They cast Awakened on it so that they could speak with it consistently, and hopefully turn it into a mount later on. They ended the session, so we have the 23rd of this month. They ended the session on the 1st. I should have put 12/7/23 session end, but they ended on the 1st of this month, alright? So they started here, and they ended here. Started here, ended here. So they're gone for about 8 days. Now, that means that those characters are going to be inaccessible until the 15th of this month. They did lots of things at that time. They did some training, they did hunting, they did downtime actions like, well, hunting's included in that. I guess I'm just going to list those out. They did some travel back and forth. They got lost. They made some sacrifices to a shrine. They did a whole bunch of activities in that time because the session can encapsulate a whole lot of time that extends beyond 1 day. And you'll notice that has nothing to do with one-to-one time. It was addressed in this handy little video here. Imagine it. Finally. Let's see here. Can I boost the audio on this? There's a few extra smart folks out there who've come up with their own special gotcha just for us. They tell us, diplomas and honors in hand, that some activities in-game take longer than just 1 day. Some activities, such as a dungeon delve, are listed as taking a week on that very same page on which one-to-one time is mentioned. How can we possibly be engaged in one-to-one time if certain activities like travel and dungeon delves take longer than 1 day? The answer's pretty simple. That has nothing to do with what we call one-to-one time. As a refresher, one-to-one time states that for each day that passes in real life between sessions, 1 day will have elapsed in-game. This has no bearing on whether the party can take actions or go on adventures in the course of their session, which take them longer than 1 day. In fact, the procedure of time jail is used explicitly to ensure the real-life calendar will catch up to those players who advance to a point in the in-game calendar further than waiting for your next session would produce. In short, one-to-one time is the name of the rule, and as such serves as an abbreviation for the rule's full and active description. If something's made you so incensed as to ask whether your party has to wait 2 weeks should your character choose to spend that time scratching their ass, I recommend closing your internet browser of choice. Okay, we don't need to continue with the insults that I've given people. So, let's see here. It's funny because the recommendation is only to advance game time when no one is playing for some reason, but here he is saying that you will need to arbitrarily slow down game time when characters are training. No, I'm not slowing down game time. I'm just slowing down those specific characters. And again, for any activity which takes them longer than 1 day. And I explain it in the very next line. The procedure of time jail prevents characters from advancing too far ahead in the in-game calendar. And his response is, except presumably when spending 1 or more days traveling to a dungeon locale or resting for a few days to recover hit points. I never said that. Again, he read into something. I gave one example of something that could take you longer than 1 day, and here he is saying, well, what about this other stuff that takes you longer than 1 day that you didn't mention? Does time jail not apply to these activities? These people are deranged. I'm sorry, they're too stupid to live. We have to get rid of them. In Minecraft. So, unless you're pretending that the way Gary intended you to play the game was to state that you were traveling to a dungeon location, but since it takes a week to stop, roll up new characters, and do something else for an entire week. No, if you're traveling to a dungeon location, you would advance 7 days, the in-game calendar. You would advance another 7 days because it takes you about 6 days of prep and 1 day of actual delving, at least as far as AD&D is concerned, to go into a dungeon. I think that's another recommendation. And then you would do the delve. So you've advanced 2 weeks ahead in the in-game calendar, plus however much time you actually spent inside the dungeon. And then when you closed out that session, let's say it took you 2 weeks, and let's say you spent 3 days inside the dungeon or around the dungeon. Well, those characters are 17 days ahead, so we're going to put those characters to the side for 17 days. That's all we're saying. That includes day 54, where Group E, F loot the dungeon. The session ended on day 54 for E and F. Day 51 is when B and C call it quits in the same session. Nah. I'm sorry, man. I'm sorry that your upbringing, or your mother, or your father, or your teachers did this to you. My heart genuinely bleeds for you. I would not want to have to deal with these kinds of brainworms. I couldn't imagine living with these kinds of brainworms. It would just upend my life. It would make me unable to function. I would need to wear a helmet wherever I went. I would need to go online with parental controls. I don't know how you slipped around them. I don't know if your handler is on hand, or if they're paying enough attention. They suck a lot. The mental health facility handlers. You know, they're not good at their jobs. So, imagine saying that you want to search a room. Oh, here we go. And then by that logic, when you finally get to the dungeon, hopefully you made it back in a real-time week, otherwise you just died. That's stupid. Explore a few rooms, fight some monsters, and say you're going back to town. Or should you dare to rest outside the dungeon, wait an entire day to resume play so the real-world calendar can catch up? No, we don't do it based off of rest. We just do it based off when the session ends. It's pretty simple. Imagine saying that you want to search a room for hidden doors, traps, and such. The process takes 10 minutes. You all have to just sit there and do nothing for 10 minutes. That's not what we said. It's just 1 day in real life. 1 day in game. 1 day in real life. 1 day in game. I specify this. They can only get so far ahead as the single session will take them. This statement means nothing, as session duration varies, not only from group to group, but even a given group can and will have sessions of different lengths. That's the whole point, is some guys are going to end 14 days ahead, some guys are going to end 1 day ahead, some guys are going to end 17 days ahead, or 3 months ahead. It would be weird for somebody to finish 3 months ahead, but whatever. I'm sorry, this has already been specified. You just submitted that everything before you pack it in for the night is a single session. Now you're saying that is okay. If you're not hearing the words coming out of my mouth, I'm just gonna do that again. You could come back in 5 minutes if you've improved in some way. DMs and players will also handle things differently. Yeah, but like, here's the thing: everybody is going to have a different session length, and they're gonna be different in how far ahead they get in the game. But everybody's session is presumably going to end at some point. So all we said was, hey, just mark down where that session ended and compare it to the real life calendar. And when the real life calendar catches up to where the session ended, you could use those characters again. But this guy wasn't paying attention. It's weird for this guy to not be paying attention, given that he went line by line and responded basically to everything. But I think what's going on here is he's not seeing the whole picture. He's going, because he's going literally line by line and avoiding everything that we specified so far, I don't think he gets it. This guy is really mad that I credited the person who publicized this rule and made the first and only big push at the time to use one-to-one time. Let's see here. Again, it's not a rule. It's only a recommendation. Jeffro didn't discover anything. He read a recommendation and was either so stupid that he confused it for a rule. I too get, I'm there. I'm just like Jeffro. If somebody tells me, hey, this is the best way to play, don't play your campaign without this, I also confuse that for a rule. I'm right there with Jeffro. My guess is that people that bothered to read the book saw that, maybe even tried it, but then realized that they have lives and other shit to do and just stopped running it that way since it's not a rule. I think that people read... I don't have any confidence that the people who originally started playing AD&D managed to read the rule books at all, because they didn't manage to pass on these traditions. They didn't manage to pass on weapon versus AC, or training costs, or training times. So, I don't know. I don't know where he's getting that. Besides, it doesn't provide any benefit, and doesn't even make any sense. Well, I mean, the whole video is like a lot of, I don't know. How do I put this? Spent about 12 minutes going over the different benefits from, like, for single tables, right? Small tables, here's what you do if you only have a couple of buddies around the table, here's how the game benefits you. If you have a large table, here's how the game benefits you. If you have, and here's some benefits that are universal to all tables. Here, one-to-one time is universally fair. He disagrees with this. No, it's not. It's most beneficial for players with the most free time, assuming the DM is also available. Man, people got a lot of time in a week. I know that people like to pretend that they're so busy all the time. Like, you have free time in a day, where you're just kind of like scrolling on Twitter, or writing a 7,900 word screed about how you misunderstood something that couldn't have been explained in simpler terms to you. So, like, obviously people have time. And it doesn't take much time for people to say, like, hey, by the way, I want to make a scroll in my downtime. Can I do that? And the DM says, sure. Mark this gold off your character sheet. It's not a lot of time to adjudicate these things between sessions. It can stack up if you have a lot of different players, but that's where time jail comes in, is you say, okay, we're just going to kind of standardize everybody to the same calendar or the same baseline, which is you're not going to do anything until this calendar catches up to you. That's the whole point. That saves us a lot of time. So, I don't know. You see, time must advance forward in your game. Only if something is going on and the DM is fast-forwarding past the tedium. No, time must advance forward in your game so your players can do things like build castles and make scrolls and not get dragged down to the lowest common denominator of what the party wants to do. Because the one thing that doesn't take any time at all is just going out and fighting things. So if you have a campaign in which time doesn't matter, then what tends to happen is the people who want to do downtime actions get... they have different downtime actions in mind. Yep, alright, let's say you have a party of 6. You have 2 people who are interested in downtime actions. You have 4 people who are not interested in downtime actions. Those 2 people have different downtime actions in mind. So they are split. Even if they had a 3-3 split, if they could convince one other person to do downtime, they're all interested in different things to do during downtime. They're probably going to have different durations. So they are outvoted to do whatever the least time-consuming action is in-game, because the only time that they have access to the campaign is during a session, which makes it really weird when people say that, time is only beneficial for players with the most free time. It's like, man, if you restrict all of the game time to like 1 3-hour block inside of a week, or maybe every 2 weeks, or once a month, that's way more restrictive than saying that you have access to the campaign 24/7. During the Sleepy says, I wish I had the confidence to write 5,000 words condemning the problem of having to spend imagined time in the real world just edging about getting to play later that no one suggested doing. Yeah, it's a little weird. Quantum Wing says, people stop running it that way because they don't have multiple parties in the same game world. Let's see here. Bradford Walker says, no, many of them did not. They also didn't do PvP much. A lot of gaming fallacies began with them. I'm really excited to do PvP in 5th edition specifically. There's a lot of events coming up. I think that mind control is a really underrated way to... I don't think it's underrated. I think people avoid it for what's probably really good reasons, and I might be about to detonate my campaign. Bearded Devil 1864 says, simple question. How many game days can be played during a single session? As many as you can cover in a single session. You might spend the entire session doing a 1-day dungeon delve. You might spend the entire session going through multiple planes of existence and traveling multiple days at a time. There is a theoretical upper limit. I don't know specifically what that limit is. There's probably like a range band where most people are going to travel probably only about somewhere between 1 to 3 weeks ahead in a single session. It's probably most things are going to fall somewhere in between there, and then you're going to have some weird outliers. But why are you asking me that question? You already know that the rule only applies to time outside of the session. So where's the question coming from? Let's see here. Events must take place, the campaign must progress to feel real. That's kind of the point of the stuff earlier, is like people need to be able to access. I joke often, I really miss my friend Matt's campaign back up in South Jersey. That campaign has been ongoing for like 2 years. I think there was like one campaign that they had in the intermediate that went for a few months. But let's see here. What day does the next session begin? What are you asking? What day does the next session begin? I feel bad because English is probably not this person's first language, and so they're not communicating the thought that's in their head, or maybe they're working with they typed down a long message or a long question, and the word count brought them down. That sucks. I'm sorry that you're having this communication issue right now. Game day. No, what do you mean? That doesn't clarify anything to me. I need you to speak in... Okay, I need you to speak in a sentence structure that has a subject and a verb, and I need you to I just need you to give me the full picture there. But, let's see here. Because I'm going to have a different answer depending on whether or not you ask if I'm using time jail, or if I'm just using one-to-one time. Because I've done one-to-one time without using the time jail procedure. I did it in the first Chilmus Valley test campaign, and I did it for the first few months of the second Chilmus Valley test campaign. What I eventually did was I switched over to using time jail because the campaign started expanding with more and more people, and and basically time was really slipping away from the players in a way where it was advancing too far ahead, based off of, like, we would start from wherever they had ended the session. That's where we would start off of and move forward from there. Let's see here. Events don't feel more real when game time advances despite nobody playing. I'm sorry, dude, that's wrong. Everybody, if you say by fiat, okay, the army's gonna crash down on you today. The army's gonna crash down on you today because I decided it, then the players know that you just kind of said that via fiat. It's a little weird. But no, when events happen in-game because the players, like, you know, they caused them, or they had advance notice or advance warning, like the players are going to, like, here's an example. If I go up to the overworld map, the Fane's Frost advance at a rate of 1 hex per week. I gotta add more hexes. I should do that after this stream. Every time I say that, I forget. I really, maybe I should do it during the stream. I have a lot of words to go through. So Zephane's Frost advance at a rate of 1 hex per week. And because it goes at a rate of 1 hex per week, the players, if the frost gets down here, where's the player's keep? If the frost gets down here, they've had literally months of advance warning, advance notice that the frost is coming. If I said tomorrow that we're skipping ahead 4 months so that the frost can arrive at this person's specific keep, and now you have to stop whatever it is that you were doing and start resolving, or worse, maybe there's no player characters at the keep, and the frost is just going to destroy their home base. Which sounds more real to you? In one case, we have a consistent, telegraphed advancement of time in which events are happening, and the players can affect them. They could choose to affect them before they're affected by these events. They can try to prevent them. They could try to compensate for or mitigate them when they do arrive. And in the other one, you have just, I tell the players that their keep got destroyed today unless they do something, with no advance warning, or no real advance warning. Which of these sounds more real to you, the players? I don't know, man. I think if this guy just said, hey, your base is destroyed because I said so, then that would feel not real to me. For example, one thing Broasaur tourists have said multiple times is if you... I think I have new comments. Let's see here. People are giving examples of how long their players can be out of play. Brian Renninger gives a really good example. A Dryad might abduct a character, and that character is in time jail for 4 years. Oh, goodness. Because it was 4 weeks, those players were out of play for about a month, says Elfinder General. Nice to see you, Brian and Elfinder, by the way. Let's see here. Bearded Devil has amended their question. If session ended on day 51, on what game day does the next session begin if 4 actual days have passed? If 4 actual days have passed... Does it say day 55? Another try on day 54. Let's see here, because these guys... Yeah, that's E and F. Okay, 4 actual days later, and it's best to use 1 actual day equals 1 game day when no play is happening. On day 55, player characters B, C, and D enter the dungeon and find the area they selected has already been cleaned out by E and F on the previous day. Had they come the day after the previous game session, which apparently ended on day 51, game day 52, and done the same thing, they would have found the monster. The session ended on day 51. On what game day does the next session begin if 4 actual days have passed? It's pretty clearly day 55. That's where we got this idea. And to be clear, that's the next session for player characters B, C, and D. And this is specifically, by the way, not using the time jail procedure. I'm wondering if that's the gotcha he's fishing for, but like we've been pretty open about like, hey, we just use time jail as something to like save resolution time and to like not lose our minds when we're trying to adjudicate stuff. So I'm wondering if that's the gotcha he's fishing for. For A, B, and C ended on day 51, not E and F, who end that same session on day 54. Yeah, no, it says that. E and F enter the dungeon. Let's see here. On day 51, player characters do this, these guys do this, and E and F on day 51 enter the dungeon. They spend the better part of the day surviving, but do well enough to rest a couple of game days. So they do 1 day of surviving, rest for 2 days, and return for another try on day 54. BCD decides to take a trip. I don't know. No, it says B, C, and D are resting. Explicitly. I think we've already gone over the reading comprehension issue previously, so please just stick to quoting the exact text. Day 51, player A's character is off on a journey. B, C, and D are resting. E and F enter the dungeon. Day 51, B, C, and D are resting. 4 actual days later, they go into the dungeon on day 55. Maybe it is an intelligence problem. I'm worried. Ooh, we finally got down to the benefits. We were talking about, like, why you don't want to have, like, arbitrary passage of time, because if you just leave things up to DM Fiat and the DM just, like, makes an event happen, it really puts them at a disadvantage. Because what's more likely to happen is that the DM will just not use any events that put the players at a disadvantage because everybody knows that it's fake. It's just the DM inflicting, I destroy your keep on you because I decided that's happening today. The players are very keenly aware that that's what's going on. So some DMs will engage in that bad behavior, but most of them just won't. And as a result, the gameplay, the variety of gameplay experiences actually flattens. Because if you don't allow for these high variance, like really low lows of getting your keep destroyed or the potential to get your keep destroyed and all the activities that would come from trying to prevent your keep from getting destroyed, or building a keep in the first place and getting a really high from having built that keep, you just lose out on those experiences, except for when the DM gets to arbitrarily decide that you lose this cool thing that you spent so much time building. So that would suck. There's a bunch of stuff about what players would and wouldn't do, which I'm not taking from somebody who hasn't playtested this and hasn't interacted with and self-admits that they don't know what AD&D is for, which is a little weird. What session does character A spend the 75 days of adventure to the Oracle? I don't know. Of what relevance is that to the conversation? He didn't deny the thing that I said he was fishing for, so I'm pretty sure I'm pretty sure I nailed it at this point. It's taking a long time to go between these, so I assume he's like looking at different spots of the text. I'll probably just ban him in a couple of minutes. This is gross and embarrassing behavior. So we're going to go down here, blah, blah, blah. There's no way to move the campaign forward without it feeling arbitrary if you just leave it up to DM Fiat. I should have sent this guy the script or the transcript that I used so that he could have like copied it over. I totally would have done that for him. I know that I haven't blocked, but there's ways to reach me. If I have you blocked on Twitter, there's ways to reach me. Let's see here. Why don't you say what the purpose of your question is then? Just go ahead and say, hey, I don't think it works because these guys, because clearly this guy isn't using time jail. Which is fine. We never accused Gary of using time jail in the AD&D rulebooks. We just said, hey, we use time jail because we need to do it in order to keep the campaign running and to keep resolution time down. We use a procedure, which is not explicitly forbidden by the rules, to make sure that the rules are functioning as intended. I've been very upfront about that. There's the rule, one-to-one time, and then there's a procedure used to enhance it. That's in the very first lines of my video, quoted in this delightful Unabomber screed. Let's see here. There's no way to move the campaign forward without it feeling arbitrary if you just leave it up to DM Fiat. It's not arbitrary for the players to tell the DM that they want to rest for a week to recover hit points, and then for the DM to perhaps roll for random events or some such, and or to just declare that a week passes. This is because events in-game already pass at a slower or faster rate than actual time. Yeah, so adding one thing that's consistent makes it not arbitrary. He says it is arbitrary to have in-game time progress faster than actual time sometimes, such as, presumably, when resting 1 turn out of 6, slower at others, such as during combat. Again, one-to-one time only applies to 1 day. In real life, means 1 day in-game. That's not arbitrary. That's specifically tied to a unit. It's a unit of time that adjusts like the gameplay loop of where characters are choosing to engage in specific activities, and specifically to preserve a space for activities that take longer than 1 day. That's not arbitrary any more than like just one thing having a casting time of a minute versus a casting time of 10 minutes versus a casting time of 8 hours versus a casting time of 1 day is arbitrary. It is arbitrary that you play D&D and not Traveler. This is true. I really got to get that Traveler game going sometime. I got too many games to play. Let's see here. So again, this guy doesn't understand. That isn't the same kind of arbitrary as making up rules as you go along. Yeah, these guys are... I think they just know that they're making choices that they're just kind of inflicting on other people with no justification. So they have to call everything arbitrary to feel better about themselves. Group A moves forward 10 days, Group B moves forward 20 days, Group C moves forward 100 days. If you move the game forward 100 days so folks can catch up to Group C, then Group A and B are going to be pissed off when they were hoping to get stuff accomplished in the next 90 days. Yet players who can only play once every 2 weeks are perfectly fine when their characters do nothing for 2 in-game weeks, even though they would obviously have. No, they're doing downtime, dude. That's the whole point. Is that there's stuff to do in between sessions. I know that you're not familiar with this because you didn't pay attention to the video, you didn't pay attention to the rule books, you didn't pay attention to the hobby, but people want to do stuff like, you know, they want to make potions, or they want to go out hunting, or they want to, like, maybe they want to drum up some juicy adventure hooks or adventure leads in between sessions. Maybe they want to do some crime. That'd be fun. If you have your thief player, he wants to go out and make a little bit of extra cash in between. Hey, you got 2 sessions, you got 2 full weeks away from the paladin. Nobody's watching. You just got a slight chance that something's going to go terrible in the next 2 weeks while you're thieving and pickpocketing, but that's not doing nothing. Again, the people who or take on henchmen or hirelings, both of which are downtime actions. Perfect, straight from the book. So the guy, let's hear, what passage does it state that any game activity is played in between sessions? What do you mean by any game activity? Again, you're just wording this to get a stupid gotcha, but it's not going to work because we've actually played through this rule. If time is progressing in between sessions and one of our characters is not in time jail, there's nothing barring us from saying, hey DM, my guy is going to spend 2 weeks pickpocketing. My guy is going to spend 2 weeks trying to find hirelings and henchmen. And he's going to put up some posters and some flyers and spend some gold in trying to get either a greater quantity of henchmen and hirelings or maybe a better quality of henchmen and hirelings. So point where it says that. It's not a gotcha. Again, there's nothing barring us from taking that activity in between sessions. If you want to make the claim that we're doing something wrong, you're welcome to point where it says that we're not allowed to engage in game activity when we're not directly at the table. Can you think of one? I can't think of one. Nobody's pointed it out to me in the past 4 years that I've been doing this. Can you think of an example where I'm not allowed to do something in between sessions? Can you think of a game example, something prescribed by the rules that says only let the players buy rations while they're at your physical game table? Is that a rule? Or is that just something the character can do? And if we assume that time is passing in between sessions, then the characters can still do stuff because they have time to do it. Oh, is that Rule 0? Oh, you poor thing. As we all know, Rule 0 is all about things for which there are no prohibitions in the rule book, and we're encouraged to do in the rule book. Okay. If that's the same as saying that I'm getting rid of weapon versus AC, you're welcome to that opinion. Nobody believes you. It's obvious horseshit. There's no way to connect that to anything I've said so far. In fact, the game is pretty specifically clear that on matters on which the rules are silent, I can make decisions. I don't think that the rules are silent on this in particular, because Gary talks an awful lot about how I'm supposed to be doing things in between sessions. I don't know if you remember this. You may ask why time is so important, if it causes such difficulties, blah 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 blah. Well, as initially pointed out, it's a necessary penalty imposed upon characters for certain activities. Beyond that, it also gives players yet another interesting set of choices and consequences. The latter tends to bring more true-to-life quality to the game, as some characters will use precious time to their utmost advantage, some will treat it lightly, and some will be constantly wasting it to their complete detriment. Time is yet another facet which helps to separate superior players from the lesser ones. If timekeeping is a must from a penalty standpoint, it is also an interesting addition from the standpoint of running a campaign. I'm sorry, man, but if the rules say that I can do things between sessions because it's time is passing between sessions, and you don't have anything that says I can't do things between sessions, it's not Rule 0, it's just following the rules. If it's not a Rule 0 ruling, this should be easy. Yeah, show me a single passage in the book that says I can't buy rations in between sessions. If you find one, I will delete my video on one-to-one time. I'll delete my channel. Go ahead. Let's see here. Where were we? Okay, so Just to reiterate, players who can only play once every 2 weeks are perfectly fine when their characters do nothing. They don't have to do nothing. The rule is specifically in place so that they can engage in downtime actions. The whole point of downtime actions is that you're going to be spending time. And time is a limited resource. So you have things that take longer than a single session or take longer than a single day because they give you pretty substantial benefits. Hirelings and henchmen are a pretty good example. Because people like having, if you have more people around there, if you have more people around you, you can just kind of do more stuff. You could give them orders, say, hey, you go hold that lever over there. Because I bet it opens up a portcullis with treasure behind it. Trust me. Trust me, I bet there's treasure behind that. Again, no shade in doing what you want to do, even if it doesn't specifically state that you can't. Well, yeah. Because that's encouraged by the rules. Is that, like, if a game tells me that I can make attack rolls, and there's no specific ruling against me making attack rolls, then generally we understand that to be a rule that I can just do. I can just do a thing unless there's something specific which says that I can't. That's the whole idea between specific trumps general. So if I'm allowed to buy things, or if I'm allowed to make attack rolls, let's go with attack rolls. No, let's go with the buy things first. So if we go with that example, man, try again. Man, you still haven't given me a single ruling that says I can't do this. You got anything? Do you have a single passage to point to that says we're doing something that's against the rules? Do you have anything? Because I've given you 2 passages now. I gave you the page 37. I gave you, I can't quite remember what this quote is from. John gave me this quote. I can't remember where this one came from. Let's go with the buy things example. I'm allowed to buy things with a ration, or like a ration, unless I don't have any money for it. If I don't have money for it, then I can't buy it. But besides or maybe, there's not a shopkeep around, right? We're in the middle of the woods. That's another example of why I wouldn't be able to do something. But the general expectation is, if I'm in town, and I have money, and there are no other prohibitions against me buying things, either by circumstance or by, I don't know, DM fiat or something. I can't really imagine. We'll just say by circumstance. Then I could just go buy that ration. There's nothing preventing me from doing it. I can make attack rolls. Unless I'm paralyzed, right? If I'm under the effects of a whole person spell, or I'm being, like, grappled in some way that, like, let's say I don't have access to my weapon for whatever reason, then I wouldn't be able to make an attack roll with my longsword. But if there's no, I don't have to, like, if we're at the start of combat, nothing's happened to me, I have my longsword, I have initiative, and I say I'm making an attack roll, I don't have to look in the rulebook to justify making that attack roll. That's something that's already been specified as something that my character can do. If you have something specific that's going to stop me from making an attack roll, then go ahead and just point me to the passage. That's fine. It kind of says, like, it just kind of seems like you don't have an objection. It just seems like you have nothing. Like you can't think of a single example. You can't think of a single passage in the game because you know it doesn't exist. You know that players have freedom to do whatever they want, unless there's a specific passage saying no. And that's just the game. I don't know what Rule Zero has to do anything with it. But if you come up with something, like, go right ahead. In fact, I'm going to give you a little bit of time to come up with that example. You could do a battle played entirely off session that doesn't differ turn by turn from an in-session game, like make moves by mail game. Yeah, that's pretty common. There are rules for attack rolls, that's why it's a bad example. Where in the rules does it say that your players can perform actions outside of the game session? No, there's a rule for performing actions that take time. You jackass. There's no prohibition against taking actions outside of the game session, or inside of the game session, or in some other ethereal realm. Bradford, do you have the do you know how much time it takes to do the hireling downtime action? Go ahead and pull that up. Go ahead and find for me where it says that we can't do that in between sessions. Because the understanding is, if time is passing between sessions, then your character can just do stuff. If you have any reason to think that they can't, and that Gary said, if you have any reason to think that Gary thought that that the game recommended that the session should progress 7 days, or that the in-game calendar should progress 7 days between sessions, but that the characters should sit there doing nothing, you're welcome to provide any supporting evidence for that. I'd be happy to adjust my tact here. I think you've got another 3 minutes left on there. So you have time to find it. The rules of the spying rules, looking for henchmen, special research. Yeah, go ahead and pull those up. And just let me know how much time any of those take. Or might take, for instance, if they're not specific. If they're like, hey, here's a general recommendation on target, or how long it might take to research a spell, blah, blah, blah. You get the idea. Let's see here. There's some weird stuff. Yeah, he just goes really on and on and on about... Why, no, if I blow up your castle, because I decided that it happened today, it's not arbitrary at all. It's not arbitrary if I say that the player's castle blows up, because I said so. That's totally fine. Double says, in the Discord, I've been in the West Marches where I never actually was able to play, mostly because the main cast had a sort of priority that probably would have been shared better with one-to-one time. That's kind of the idea between what we do in this one, is if I have time during... A lot of days I have split shifts and I can like run a session in between that split shift. You know, if I'm doing like on hours work and then after hours work, then I have some time for like the Euro players, where if I'm running a game at night, then the Euro players normally don't have it. But because we have like a set, because the understanding is that like, hey, time progresses in between sessions, and they can, I mean, presumably if nobody's running sessions for them, then they can run sessions for themselves, then they get to play. DMG page 35, it will take 2 to 8 days for all prospective henchmen who are going to apply to locate the player character. That's interesting. So does it say anything about how the player character can't do that in between sessions? Is there a single line about how the player character can't do that in between sessions? We have a rule for henchmen, just like we have rules for attack rolls. Where in the rules does it state that your players can perform actions outside of the game session? I hate to tell you, I think it's on page 38. Spells beyond those at start. Oh, is this... Did I pull up the... Oh, there we go. Oh man, I was wrong. It's on page 37. Ba-da-ba-da-ba-da-ba-da-ba. How many days can be played in a session? How many? I think I already answered that earlier. Bearded, I'm going to give you 60 seconds to respond with the answer that I gave you earlier. I'm going to ban you. Because I already answered that question. Just repeat back to me what I told you earlier to confirm that you're listening and not just being a complete and total waste of space and waste of time. The sort of person that nobody wants to game with because they're constantly theory crafting on forums. Because they're constantly just not able to engage with the examples that we give people about here's how this stuff works in a campaign. Here's an example of my players going forward 8 days. Here's a different example of my players going forward 1 day and playing the next day in real life and technically in the game as well. "20 seconds, Bearded." Can anybody feel the tension? I hope he's not driving right now. This would suck. He said he was packing up from work. This would be awful. Can you imagine if I was responsible for a car accident? I'm going to keep stalling by wondering about horrible things, because I genuinely don't want them to happen. That would suck if he's, like, waiting for a red light and, like, no, please, come on, I got it. I did remember. So in those 2 to 8 days to gain henchmen are not played within the weeks of the game world. Okay, so he didn't. So we're just gonna... I'm sorry, man. Okay. Just to reiterate, folks, the number of days that can happen in a single session vary because you do different things from session to session. That's the whole point of the time jail procedure, is it puts everybody, no matter what kinds of activities they're doing, on a baseline that they can access and keep consistent between multiple groups. Thank you, Brian Renninger, as many days as you can get through, which means if it goes longer than the 7 days until the next session, then those characters are in time jail during the next one. And to be clear, I run multiple sessions per week, generally speaking. I think that between myself and Bar last month, in the month of November, we had a lot of sessions. I mean, we had a lot of sessions. Let's see here. Party arrives at the Rogue Tower, so that was from the previous month. Let's see here. This guy was petrified eternally. I wonder how many days that counts as. Remember bitterly the monthly Exalted sessions 20-ish years ago. I'm sorry to hear that. Let's see here. Mimosa's Caravan arrives at the search area. I think that would have been... What did Mimosa's Caravan start? Dragon Hunt... Oh, wait, no, these were for the month of, okay, that's 10/28 session start. 11/4 session start, I think that was the first Linwood Isle session that I didn't run. That was one of the other referees, who's usually a player, Bar, Lover. Yeah, 11/8 session start. When did the 11/8 session start thing wrap up? That was on the 25th? I think it took him a really long time. 11/8/23 session end. So it went from the 25th of one month to the 10th of the next month. It took him a while. We have the Temple of Zimric. That was all done inside of a single day, and it was really fun. It was just a short, like, I think this one place was doing a, whatchamacallit, Temple of Zimric. Temple of Zimric session start and end. I think it was just like this temple dedicated to like a god of trickery just held like a contest to go through a bunch of different puzzles and stuff. And then we went through it and we beat it in a single day because it was just a bunch of puzzles. And not to flog a dead war, but what Bearded Evil asked us in the next paragraph. Is player A barred from the second session that takes place on blah 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 blah? It explains that players B, C, and D don't get to retroactively use their inactive time to scoop players E and F in clearing the dungeon. And to be clear, that's even without using time jail. Because again, Gary's not using time jail here, he's just using one-to-one time. That's why we separated these two things. The hope was that if we separated these two things, if we explained them separately, then people on the armpit of the IQ bell curve would be able to intake them, or at the very least participate in a campaign in which rules like these were active. We were wrong about that. We underestimated the degree to which the RPG hobby had become the drain catch of stupid people. And you're going to find creative and smart people in the RPG hobby. I think it's the most fun that you could have with your brain. Besides doing either role plays or, probably besides doing role plays or creating your own game or story content, either. But there's a lot of people here who just can't get it. So, if you could rewind the tape, I've specified to this guy like 60 times, hey, Gary's not talking about time jail here. He's not talking about time jail. Time jail was a procedure we made up, just like the little downtime cards that I have my players fill out, so it's easier for me to adjudicate downtime. It's a procedure. It's like electing a caller. It's a procedure. You say, hey, that guy's going to tell me what the party's actions of this round were. And what that's going to do is it's going to help keep me from going insane, trying to keep track of everybody's things. I'm just kind of distributing the workload of the campaign evenly to make sure that, we're clearing enough rooms in a given night, that combat's not dragging, it's not a slog, to make sure that everybody's paying attention, because it's not just me doing the resolution right now. Your buddy Alice is going through Bob, Carol, and David to make sure that they're all up to date on their actions for combat and that nobody's missing something because they're not paying attention. It's a procedure. Did E and F play out day 51 to day 54 during session 1 or during the following? Let's say following. It's a stupid hot thing here. Or during the 4 days between session 1 and session 2. Let me ask you, what would that change? To be clear, example specifically is for on day 51, player A's character is off on a journey, B, C, and D are resting on their laurels, and E and F enter the dungeon. They spend the better part of the day surviving, but do well enough to rest a couple of game days and return for another try. So day 51, they do some dungeoneering. They spend day 52 and 53 resting, and they go in for another try on day 54. Yeah, he's still ass mad. It's really unfortunate because we've gone over this like 6 times. Erebus, I'm going to consider not banning your second account if you respond to with the answer that I gave you earlier and just repeated like 2 seconds ago. But I got to go through the next thing here. But again, you guys see, like, there's no way to go over all of this. There's no way to convince these people, because what they're really ass mad about is that, oh crap, I wouldn't be good enough to run a campaign like this. I'm not as elite as those other guys. I don't know how to win at RPGs. I don't know how to even play well in RPGs. Nobody who does play well at RPGs, they do a lot of, they clear a lot of rooms in a given night, they're good at building castles, they seem to experience have a really high variance in the types of encounters and missions and gameplay that they get to go through from day to day. I'm not like those guys. I just can't do it. Well, Erebus, you've been asking the same clarification question like 6 times over. You don't seem to be able to repeat my answer back to me. So it kind of seems like you're either deaf, which is possible. I've got an auditory processing disorder. Not wearing earplugs with the 357 Magnum will do that to you. Rest in peace, the Model 28 Highway Patrolman. And also a lot of lawnmowers. I really should have had ear protection in for those. 10 years groundskeeping. Ugh. Nah, don't give him a different example, because he doesn't understand the example that's already been clearly laid out to him. I wonder how frustrating it is to just like have this laid out to you over and over and over again. Say, hey, day 51, these guys were doing this, these other guys were doing this, these guys finished up on day 54. 4 real days later, the other guys came in on day 55 and said, oh crap, the guys who were playing from day 51 to day 54 already cleared this out. So day 51, well, keep in mind, we're not talking about time jail right now, because Gary wasn't using time jail. I think it's the gotcha that he's trying to go for right now. He's like, but what if they were using, but what if you did say that Gary was using time jail? Then you would be wrong here. Hey buddy, just so you know, we're not saying that Gary used time jail here. But I do think that you're saying that Gary is using time jail. No. It's not there. It's just the progression of time in between sessions. Whatever day happened for day 51, there were 4 days IRL between that and day 55. And on day 55, there was a different session. Seems pretty simple to me, but then again, I've never struggled with basic arithmetic. I don't know what to do. I don't know how to help you, man. Ooh, so here we go. This is a lot of fun stuff that we could actually talk about. Let's see here. Time is their most important resource in a grand campaign. This guy doesn't know what a grand campaign is and didn't bother to ask. So as with Jeffro Gygaxian bullshit, I'm going to assume it's another made-up term in order to sound important. I think it's been around since the 70s, or maybe before that with the advent of wargaming. So it's weird that I, as a 26-year-old man, I think I was 25 at the time that I started the channel, would have some basic conception of what a grand campaign was. I also have a very handy, let's see here, I have a very handy playlist about the grand campaign. It's called Running the Grand Campaign. It currently has 3 videos, one of which is an intro, one of which is focusing specifically on the definitions, which was out at the time that he wrote this, and then Your First Adventure, which I think was also out at the time that he wrote this. Let's see here. I understand the concept as described by Ash, which is fine. However, the example given in the DMG doesn't describe it that way. Okay. If you think that day 51 plus 4 in-game days doesn't equal to day 55, you're free to maintain that opinion. I'm just going to go play with people who are not pretending not to understand basic math. Other players are competing for the same dungeons. Or I think he thought that I meant vying for the same dungeons. That's what it was. Nice straw man. Hey man, I already gave you the explanation. I read it out to you in like a slow and comforting tone that you likely haven't heard since your father was bouncing you on your knee, assuming that you had a father because you're engaging in some rather fatherless behavior right now. And that didn't do it for you. I think you're just beyond my reach. Or beyond the reach of anybody who doesn't have a degree for the purpose of managing kids with helmets. I got nothing for you, man. 4 actual days later, on day 55, day 51, C, B, and D. There's gotta be a better way to sequence these. B, C, and D are hanging out on day 51 and resting. 4 actual days later, on day 55, player characters B, C, and D enter the dungeon. So they're resting on day 51, and then 4 actual days later, in real time, there's day 55. What could have happened? What happened to the time between day 51 and day 55? It seems like it progressed in some fashion, because Gary says 4 actual days later, and then he says it's best to use 1 actual day equals 1 game day when no play is happening on day 55. There's got to be something going on here. What did... Man, did Gary use 1-to-1 time for the players B, C, and D? Or not? You could say that he didn't use it for the other guys. That's totally fine. Did he use it for B, C, and D? Day 51, 4 actual days later, best to use 1 actual day equals 1 game day when no play is happening. Day 55, there's a new session, and those 3 characters enter the dungeon. No, I don't care whether you're asking about B, C, and D, because you've been asking about them for the past hour now, maybe hour and a half. Go ahead, answer yes or no. Did he use 1-to-1 time for those 3 characters? You've got 10 seconds. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Unfortunate. Unfortunate. Again, these people can't be helped. So, other players are vying for the same dungeon. Sounds more like a competitive board game. Also, this system rewards players able to commit the most time. Why would I want to partake in a game when other players can commit far more time than I, especially when it means that my character will end up wasting far more time, even though that's not what he would be doing. Again, you're able to do downtime. That was very much like 4chan. I wouldn't want to besmirch the good name of 4chan with whatever that idiot was. Yeah. No, if you spend more time doing downtime, then you could make some scrolls, and if you have a couple of extra sleep spells that might get you through the dungeon faster, you can charge other players. You can say, hey, players B, C, and D, I know that we already took out the big loot on floor 1, and now there's just a bunch of dickheads around there, and you guys are thinking of you're wondering whether you should go to a different dungeon or stay with this one. Don't worry, man. I'll sell you a couple of scrolls that I made in my downtime, because I can't play for the next month or so. So my character's going to spend the next month making some scrolls. And if you want to purchase those off of me, I'll sell them to you at a discount. In fact, I'll give them to you for free, but you just got to give me a share of the loot that you find in session 2 and 3 and such like that. Because that's what actual players do. A bunch of my players went on a dragon hunt up in this area over here. They flew over with an airship, and by flying over with an airship, they were able to save some travel time, and they took most of the characters over there. I think it was on, what was the dragon hunt session? Let's do Mimosa's Caravan. Yeah, 11:10, and then 11:11 I ran a different session that was also going up that way, but these guys starting on 11:11 were on a caravan, and the guys from 11:10 were going over to whatchamacallit, we're going over via airship. So a whole bunch of characters went over there, and they got a whole bunch of loot. A whole bunch of loot. They got a lot of stuff over there. And one of the things that they agreed upon when they were splitting up the treasure was, hey, let's do this thing. Okay, I've got upkeep and expenses to maintain. Everybody is pretty much using my keep right now as home base, so I need a little bit of extra money. Okay, I have a bunch of characters here. I'm not going to take extra shares for the fact that I have more character. I think Landy had like 3 characters present. Most of the other people had like 2 characters. I think pretty much everybody had 2 characters present besides Landy. And I think I bit my tongue, you know that. Awful. That Landy went over there and said, "Hey, I'm going to take an equal share of the treasure, but I'm going to take a extra share for Sierra's Keep because I think that's how this should happen. I'm kind of subsidizing a lot of people's living expenses and gameplay expenses. So if you want to hang out, if you want to do this, then that's what you got to do." Oh, Chizzy, your server muted. Let me fix that for you. How's it going, buddy?
Hey guys. I just wanted to say hi. I haven't
Hello.
chatted with you guys in a while, played with you guys in a while. It's been super busy. I joined muted because I wanted to make sure you guys aren't having uh,
But like
like a
streaming right
serious
now?
conversation. Sorry?
I'm streaming right now. And so technically it is a
Oh snap!
serious conversation, but like I invited people to come on, so you're fine. Erebus. Oh, he's got another account. Man, this why people say fuck Erebus all the time? Oh no. It's weird that I get banned when Ash fails to answer what player A is doing during session 2. Well, besides the fact that it says player character A is off on a journey, I think I asked you to answer my question for is Gary using one-to-one time for players B, C, and D? Are they doing it or not? And I'll give you another minute, I guess. Oh, this is that Erebus. It's this guy who has me blocked. That is so weird. Why are you being a block baby when you block literally everybody on Twitter? What are you doing? You goofy ass. Anyways, we're going down a rather deranged article. So if the next response that he gives me is not yes or no to our B, C, and D doing one-to-one time, I'm just going to block the new account. I'm just going to keep blocking all the new accounts because I don't mind at this point. Really, it should be a one-strike policy, but you know, I'm a generous and kind man. So, so again, where were we? Yeah, the fact that J. Jonah Games, there it is. Patrons and NPCs are wiping out potential safe havens or places to train as they war with one another. And this guy says, sure, if you opt to run a campaign where patrons and NPCs attack trainers in a bizarrely gamist manner so the party can't level up. Let's see here. Yes, day 55 is when B, C, and D begin session 2. I don't know if they begin session 2 on that day. I just know that like 4 days passed between, because I don't know how many sessions it took them to do day 0 through day 50, because they're not using time jail. So I don't know how connected that is to the IRL calendar. Right? Theoretically, they could have done like 50 whole days in one session. I don't know. I can't think of if they like went into, yeah, so like maybe they found a dungeon and it's supposed to be like 6 days of prep and 1 day of delving. So every time that they came out, they would be resting for 6 days, resting and preparing to go back into the dungeon. I think there's a specification on what is it, 6 days of 6 days of actual adventuring and 44 days of resting and other activity. Interesting. It's not called session 2 in the example. Again, I don't know. It just says they have adventures which last a total of 50 days. I don't. Do you have any reason to think that that was all in one session specifically? I mean, Hufos is right. It's not called session 2 in the example. Reading comprehension, bro, it just says they have adventures, plural. Do you think that that's unreasonable to assume that they might have multiple sessions in the span of 50 days when another guy has one session with 4 days? You pack it in for the night. That just tells me that there was at least one session between day 50 that ended with day 50. before day 51 happened. Is it unreasonable to assume that, like, maybe there might have been more than one session? If one session encompassed 4 days, and there were 50 days of adventures, plural, that there might be? We're not making a hard yes or no here. We're just saying maybe there was more than one session there. I don't know, because he didn't number the sessions. It doesn't really seem relevant to the point that you've already admitted to the fact B, C, and D are under the effects of one-to-one time from day 51 to day 54. Travel and random encounters, yeah, you could do it. I've already shown you, like, I've given you a direct example, so I don't know why you think that this is the big gotcha. Like, I've given you an example on this calendar. I track where all the sessions end and start. Where, like, a lot, you could go a really long while inside the context of a single session. So, I don't know what you're driving at here. You tell us where the gotcha's at? I'll cop to it. These people, they're just too stupid to interact with. I feel like I'm watching a minstrel show. Just kind of sick. Like watching somebody make a act in this bizarre imitation of what they think a stupid person looks like, and it's somehow beyond parroting. So, patrons and NPCs are wiping out safe havens across the... Oh, there we go. This isn't the guy that agreed to come on Rolling Bones with me. Well, I'm Gelatinous Rube, and if you're referring to Ash of Creativity, then no, you're thinking of somebody else. Alright, see you later, Double. To answer your question, Shiza, yes, it would be... Let's see here. Is this while using the bow, or... Well, you're under the effects of a curse. So you actually can't get rid of the bow, is the idea.
That's so cool, man. It's gonna be super funny.
It's gonna be a lot of fun. It's gonna be a lot of fun, especially given how many people work with charms, because you got a lot of bards, and you got a lot of like nature-oriented casters who are charming. Not necessarily. Let me click on this here. You got a lot of nature-oriented casters who are. Please tell me that's gonna start charging. Oh man, please start. Tell me, is that gonna charge? Let's see here. Erebus says yes, 50 days for... Not charging, that sucks. 50 days for A through D in the first session, 4 days for E through F in the same session. It's weird that you missed that. Hey buddy, I've already said that it could be 1 day, and it could have been one session, it could have been multiple sessions because it's not specified. And so I wasn't going to make one claim in either direction, because you could do 50 days in multiple sessions, or you could do it in one session. And if Gary didn't say how many sessions it took, then I wasn't going to assume one way or the other. If you bring me back to this point again, I'll just ban you from the chat.
Does he even use the word session anywhere in the DMG?
Let's see here. You've never personally interacted with Rube before, Crafty. Well, you have me banned. Or sorry, you have me blocked. If we're going through session, I think he actually does say... Oh wait, no, maybe he doesn't. He just uses like all of these different, whatchamacallits, euphemisms. Like at this point in time, they join the game. The original group goes to seek the advice of an oracle after hiring an elven henchman. The remaining 3 old boys decide they don't go with the newcomers. Day 51, player A's character is off on a journey. B, C, and D are resting. E and F go into the dungeon. The latter pair spend the better part of the day surviving. 4. Let's see here. 4 actual days later, on day 55, go into the day. Oh, here we go. Had they come the day after the previous game session, day 52, and done the same thing, because remember, On day 51, E and F are adventuring, and on day 52, they're resting. So if B, C, and D had come in the day after that and done some adventuring, then they would have gotten the treasure and the monster instead.
So he's delineating between out of game time, which is 1-to-1 time, and in-game time, because it's important to keep track of both so that you can deal with time paradoxes and avoid them.
Yep. Some penalty must accrue to the non-active, but on the other hand, the overactive cannot be given the world on a silver platter. Despite time differences, the activities of the newcomers to the campaign should be allowed to stand, as Destiny has decreed that the monster in question could not fall to characters B, C, and D. Therefore, the creature was obviously elsewhere, but not dead when they visited its lair. Oh, that computer just shut off. That's fine. Let's see here. Therefore, the creature was obviously elsewhere, not dead, when they visited its lair on day 52, but it had returned on day 56. Being aware of time differences between groups of player characters will enable you to prevent the big problems. You will know when the adventuring of one such group has gone far enough ahead in-game to call a halt. That's an interesting phrase. You will know when the adventuring of one such group has gone far enough ahead in-game time to call a halt. And this is particularly true with regard to town and dungeon adventures. That's really interesting. I drop a comment on X so that you know I'm not the guy who blocked you. Tell you what, I'm going to check that right over here.
I think it's important to point out, in addition, that there are multiple different rules that are contingent upon 1-to-1 time throughout the DMG that just don't make sense as a concept without 1-to-1 time.
Right, or some kind of timekeeping.
At the very least, some form of timekeeping, yes.
Oh, this guy said he's not the guy who blocked me, but he has like all these really weird, just kind of retweet spams, weird videos, and he only has 8 followers. I should block him instead. I'm sorry, but like, to be clear, I only accept criticisms nowadays from people who are willing to write at least 7,000 words. And I know that you're trying to make up for that in the YouTube comments right now, but I don't think that the individual comments add up to 7,000. And in fact, I think I should penalize them in some way for being split up, because you've had enough difficulty stringing a thought together. I mean, tonight alone, I feel like I should block you out of principle at this point. But anyways, back to the article. If you opt to run a campaign where patrons and NPCs attack trainers in a bizarrely gamist manner so the party can't level up, is that so the party can't level up, or is it just so like, hey, you have these weird, like, hey, occasionally towns get destroyed. Like you can't, at the beginning of Skyrim, right, the intro to Skyrim, the town that you go to gets destroyed by a dragon. So there's like, so you can't use the shops there or anything, or you can't interact with the NPCs there. Sounds alien to the actual intent of the game. Like going on adventures and gradually exploring the world. Well, do you think that going on adventures and exploring the world might have something to do with settlements? Now, this guy doesn't play AD&D, but Hoisting, correct me if I'm wrong, but there's a lot of text, and I mean a lot of text, on generating, I think it's specifically, it's Appendix B, isn't it? I was talking about Doof with this earlier. Is it Appendix B for generating the campaign?
Oh, I never really used the random generation appendices. But I will say expressly, there are rules for things like currency exchange in the far back of the book.
Page 90!
That make no sense if you're not going to have an incentive to move other places.
Let's see here. Oh, I have gems highlighted here because I was looking for Let's see here. We have duties, excises, which is the one, yeah, inhabitation and terrain. That's the one that generates a lot of ruins. I think it generates more ruins than dungeons. I'm not sure. Duties, excises, fees, tariffs, taxes, tithes, and tolls. Oh, you jerk for making me...
Ryan in chat says Appendix B.
Appendix B. There we go. Okay. But no, you're right. There's this whole thing about the economic systems of areas beyond the more active campaign areas can be viably based on lesser wealth only until the stream of loot begins to pour outwards into them. While it is possible to reduce treasure in these areas to some extent so as to prolong the period of lower costs, what kind of dragon horde, for example, doesn't have gold and gems? It is simply more heroic for the players to have their characters swaggering around with pouches full of gems and tossing out gold pieces than it is for them to have coppers. Heroic fantasy is made of fortunes and king's ransoms and loot gained most cleverly and bravely and lost in a twinkling by various means: thievery, gambling, debauchery, gift-giving, bribes, and so forth. The reality AD&D seeks to create through role-playing is that of the mythical heroes such as Conan, Offerdan the Grey Mouser, Kothar, Elric, and their ilk. When treasure is spoken of, it is more stirring when the participants know it to be treasure. Let's see here. This is interesting. Yeah, because it does go on, and I went over this, I think, with page 90. Have you ever had the opportunity to implement this in play? I would have loved it.
I have never implemented it in play simply because I know if I did, a lot of people would get frustrated to an absurd degree. The modern people are not a fan of having to deal with money changing, costing them like 30% of their income.
I wonder if I did like a flat 10%, I wonder if that would be easier. Or maybe if like a certain town maybe if a certain town was like really high in 30%, then they would just go to a different town. That might be a good idea, because if they go to, if I follow the rules about like 30% and the players decide, hey, you know what, Escharos is 7 days north by boat, and this other place is 7 days south, Bronlock is 7 days south by boat. Bronlock is only going to charge us, or Bronlock is going to charge us 30%, but Escharos is going to charge us 10%. Let's go over to Escharos. And they go to Escharos, and they see an army marching on Escharos. They're like, shoot!
That would be a pretty good way to show a distinction between a lawful evil society and a lawful good society.
Because
if they're really willing to screw over outsiders, they're going to tax you a lot more.
Yeah. Taxes as a stand-in for evil, I think, is completely appropriate. These guys both have laws. How do we determine which one is evil? Well, these guys charge 30% taxes. Totally understandable. Let's see here. So there's rules for tithes. Yeah, that's pretty cool. The town does not encourage the use of foreign currency. Merchants and other business people must pay a fine of 5% of the value of any foreign coins within their possession, plus face certain confiscation of the coins, so they will typically not accept them. Upon entering the town, non-residents are instructed to go to the street of the money changers in order to trade their foreign money for the copper cons, silver knobs, golden orbs, and platinum royals. Exchange rate is a mere 90%, so for 10 foreign copper pieces, 9 domestic copper commons are handed out. That's interesting. And a surtax of 10% against precious stones.
And of course, you can come up with weird, awkward taxes that you'd never think of as a player to, sort of entrap them into an experience, but
Yeah.
There's
You don't
lots
have
of
to.
different things you can do with, a corrupt, strange government.
There's the whole point of rules like this, I think, are to add up to stack up these little weird rules interactions and the point of stuff like one-to-one time is to stack up a bunch of different incentives at once, such that if players go to different places, it's never just one incentive to do something alone. There's a bunch of different circumstances which, by virtue of being randomly generated and hand placed in combination with one another, conspire to incentivize different actions depending on where you are in the campaign. And so, if you have a trainer in one place that you like, and is willing to like give you a pretty good quest for the sake of handling your level up, but in a different town, you have a trainer who's only going to accept gold, but that town doesn't tax you as much, or you happen to like that town more, then the players get to make a choice between which one they like, and have it meaningfully rewarded by virtue of a different game outcome, or a different outcome in game, is what I should have said. So
Yeah, you could have something like having the chaotic good, tribes out in the wastes honor their currency regardless of where it comes from, simply because of the value of the metal itself.
mhm.
So, like, for example, in history, you had the Norse. The Norse would literally just chop up coins and melt them down and make, like, armbands and chop off parts of the armbands proportional to the weight to pay for things.
I
So
had
they
that's
simply
really
did not
interesting.
care about coins.
Yeah, so they
And
weren't
they did
caring
not
about
have
the
money
coinage.
changers.
The idea was like, okay, it's just done on the weight.
Mm-hmm.
So if you had, okay, let's say that we have a bunch of guys who are willing to do all the weight, right? Like who are just, we take that example. There's a barbarian tribe out in the wilderness. They're like, let's say they're a week away to get to them. What's something that can happen along the way that might change the player incentives to get the player incentives with that are like, well, we could stay here and pay taxes, or we could travel 7 days to go meet these guys, and then we don't have to pay taxes, and we get like maximum value for our coinage. What's something that could happen or can swing that decision between these two different places? Just kind of spitballing here.
There's honestly all kinds
Well,
of
I mean, they could get a large treasure hoard of ancient coinage that is completely
You're both
worthless
talking
where
at the
they
same
are.
time.
But then you have, if you really want to get into it, then like you could talk about like finding out that the value of the coin is degenerated.
That's one thing that you could do. That's kind of like the previous town not giving you as much. In Hoistine, you said that they were getting a large hoard and what?
A large hoard of like ancient coinage that's functionally worthless where they are.
Okay. So that's one example. All right, so you both had the same example basically, was that this one is actually completely worthless over here. So we gotta take it out to the barbarian tribe. I was thinking in the manner of if the barbarian tribe is going to give you a 1-to-1 exchange rate, and these guys are going to only give you a 9-to-10 exchange rate. I think I put that right. Or maybe reverse that. It's late. It's midnight.
Could be worse. Could be up to 30%. Yeah.
It could be up to 30%. Something that might swing that decision is like the knowledge that there's a particularly dangerous creature in between, because they have to travel 7 days. You could meet a lot of dangerous shit in 7 days, and you don't want to leave your, a giant chest full of treasure lying out in the road. If you have, you have a really good chance of getting away from a dragon or a beholder or a troll or a giant or something like that along the road. But I assume if you're like carrying really heavy stuff, then that brings down your chance of evading those critters. So by nature of having
Very true.
so much loot
And it
to
could
trade
attract monsters that are attracted to gold
yeah,
and other precious metals.
and like maybe there's an enemy army like traveling along that same road. What's up?
If we're talking obstacles, then there could be like if you know that there's there's the merchant guild that you trade your money with, they could have run into them previously and made enemies of them. If you know that like the ones who are going to be doing the money changing are people that you're not going to be good with, they could
Yeah.
be hostile to you or give you really, really terrible rates.
Yeah, maybe
So
they
people
like
that run
hire
town
assassins. They
be an
know that you're
obstacle.
going outside of the town, so they hire assassins to like butcher you on the road, or bandits. Like you
That
specifically.
does sound like a lawful evil thing to do
It does.
behind the scenes.
Like, get rid of these guys. They're ruining our exchange rate. Get rid of them. Get rid of them. And yeah, so these are things that might swing you, and all of these could be in play at once to swing the players in one direction or another, because maybe they have more druids in the party, and they're like, hey, we could... Actually, it's going to be a lot easier for us to get through. It'll be a lot easier for us to get through these, for us to get through the wilderness on account of these druids and rangers that we're bringing along, and we're not going to have to worry as much about the random encounters, and we have like beasts of burden that we can ride. Like the druid is going to cast animal friendship on some giant bulls, you know. Excise and tax probably isn't good as the norm, but it could be interesting to mix things up. Yeah, that's the idea. Is like you put as many rules in place as you can manage. Put as many rules in play as you can manage, and we order them in stuff like. Wouldn't characters B and D be unplayable until 49 actual days after session 1? Hey Erebus, go ahead and let me know what I said about time jail and page 37 in the next 30 seconds, or I'm going to ban the account that you've used to comment here. I'm going to start a timer right here. What is this? That's at 34? Okay, so... we're just going to wait. No, but we're going to keep talking while this is going on. So the point is to stack up all these different little elements that are going to mix things up and provide PCs with different incentives to take different actions. Because maybe they decide it's like, yeah, it would be nice if we got a 1-to-1 exchange rate with the barbarians out there. Time jail isn't on page 37. All right, great, Erebus. Now I've got a double jeopardy for you. And I've got another 30 seconds for you to answer it. Why did you ask that question if I already told you that time jail isn't on page 37? The answer, Erebus, is that time jail isn't on page 37, and you're asking a question that's contingent on time jail. So I'm going to... So, no, they wouldn't be unplayable until 49 actual days after session 1, because time jail isn't on page 37. Or there's no, I should say there's no explicit ruling on how to handle time jail on page 37.
I mean, there's an implicit one.
There's an implicit one where he says, call for a halt.
You shouldn't have time jail at all. Just that you should account for people's time as accurately as possible, and account for it when it comes to gameplay so that items aren't duplicated by accident.
Mm-hmm. No, I think that there is one when he calls for...
Time jail kind of is implicated.
Yeah, so be aware of time differences between groups of player characters. That's where he's letting you know that you're gonna... which will enable you to prevent the big problems. Here's the sentence that I think implies time jail, and what I think he was referencing when Frank Menser and Jim Ward had characters who were placed in time jail by Gary, which is, you will know when the adventuring of one such group has gone far enough ahead in game time to call a halt. And this is particularly true with regard to town and dungeon adventurers. So I think what implies time jail, and you could disagree, I'm sure there's a number of different interpretations that you could take from this. I'm biased in favor of time jail, obviously, but I think that, you will know when the adventuring of one such group has gone far enough ahead in game time to call a halt. I think that's...
I mean, the closest thing to time jail that's even implied in this entire area would be on page 38 in the second chapter, and that's expressly talking about the difference between 1-to-1 time and the difference with actual player in-game time.
Mm-hmm.
Namely, pointing out if someone's doing a lot of downtime actions, they're going to be taking that character out of gameplay.
Out of gameplay for the... Yeah, so if they say, like, here's I'm spending the next 60 minutes, then I better not hear that player talking while if player D says, like, lays out how they're going to be spending the next.
It's the one that starts with "in effect."
Where is it? Is it over? In effect.
If you look 2 paragraphs under that,
In effect, the key is the
that's
relative
what
import.
implies time jail for me.
2 paragraphs under.
The one starting with in effect, it's
the
the
second
very last of the
paragraph.
time section.
Okay.
On page 38.
In effect, the key is the relative
You
import of
may
player
ask why
characters.
time is so important.
Okay, so that's one that we've gone to, but I'm looking at the one that says in effect, because this one is interesting. In effect, the key is the relative import of the player character's actions in the time frame. Generally, time passes day for day, or turn for X number of real minutes during active play. Players who choose to remove their characters from the center of dungeon activity will find that a lot has happened while they're away, as adventures in the wilderness certainly use up game days with rapidity, while the shorter time scale of dungeon adventuring allows many game sessions during a month or 2 of game time. Of course, this might mean that the players involved in the outdoors someplace will either have to come home to sit around or continue adventuring in the wilderness, and perhaps in some distant dungeon as well, if you are kind. Otherwise, they will perforce be excluded from game sessions which are taking place during a period of game time in which they're wandering about in the countryside doing other things. And that doesn't necessarily imply time jail there, right? That's more along the lines of strict timekeeping, I think that Hoisting would say, right?
Yeah, it's strict timekeeping. It's saying that the player can't be in 2 places at once with the same character.
Right.
That's why you have multiple characters.
Exactly. No, and we do, and guys, again, we've specified before, we don't have, time jail is not the rules. I think it's implied by the rules. I think it's compatible with the rules, maybe is a better word for it. But it's just a procedure at the end of the day. My only defense for it is that it's a procedure, like electing a caller or having a form for downtime actions that players can submit to me to make the adjudication of the game easier for me. So I don't have to track too many different, like, competing timelines, or whether one person is advancing 7 days away from day 55 and the other guy is advancing 7 days away from day 47. It's easier if, like, it's all advancing at the same, not just advancing on the same rate, but from the same baseline. So there's a return to baseline for the characters. Erebus, I'm going to let you explain. Please explain day 55 using that logic. Using what logic, dude? What are you talking about? I said, wouldn't characters B and D be unplayable until 49 actual days later? No, because that's time jail. It just said 4 days.
B, C, and D
Don't
just
go
inactive
over it,
during that time.
We've gone over
You
it
just-
for like 60 different times
Yeah.
with this guy. He just doesn't know. Because
Like,
what
if
he's
they were
trying to
off
do is say that,
in
like,
a different country doing a different thing, then yeah, they wouldn't be able to play in that area.
what he's
go to
trying
that
to get
dungeon.
at is that if day 50 was only one session, then under time jail, if days 1 through 50 happened in one session, and we were using the time jail procedure, then A, B, C, and D would be inaccessible for 50 days. And that's correct. But we've already said this example isn't using time jail, it's just using one-to-one time. Time jail is just a procedure that we use to better handle the game. And it's not mentioned in the book. It's implied by the book, it's compatible with the book, the rules are silent on this matter, so it's a procedure that we use to enhance our gameplay experience. But the fact of the matter is, on day 51, B, C, and D are resting on their laurels. 4 actual days later, they go into the dungeon on day 55. So they're using one-to-one time. They're just, is this track from the from the Out There soundtrack. No. So this one right now I think is Skyrim ambience, and then I have 2 tracks from Kingdoms of one of which is a specific track, one of which is a mix from Kingdoms of Amalur. And then I think I have Down by the River instrumental from Baldur's Gate 3. But yeah, so let's go back to this, because Erebus is still trying to say, but wait, that's not time jail, and we've already gone over 60 times. Yeah, that's not time jail. We already went over that.
Time jail is just the penalty that it's talking about.
Yeah, it's a way of adjudicating that penalty. Like, all right, what's the fairest way that we could do this across everybody? Can we do it like here? And it worked out pretty well. I mentioned earlier in the stream. Go ahead.
There are a number of ways to address the time lines that different groups have.
No, what I said like earlier in
them.
the stream is I actually did 1-to-1 time without time jail. And in a specific way, where I did, what was it? Whatever a given session ended on would be the new current date. And then the time would progress from the end date of that session. So and that caused a whole bunch of problems, because one group would advance 2 weeks forward, and then so the in-game calendar advanced 14 days ahead, and then on top of that, like, let's say 5 days passed between that session and the next one. Well, now the second group that wanted to play and do something suddenly had 19 more days of downtime that they didn't have as much to fill up because they hadn't been adventuring. It kind of sabotaged their ability to start or to launch into the campaign. Whereas the group that had already been going for a while, they had plenty of things to do in all that downtime. They didn't mind if the next group advanced things 40 days ahead, because they had plenty of gold and other stuff to spend it on. And so we transitioned to using the time jail procedure, after we started getting more groups playing in the campaign, because it made managing multiple groups easier. So we're gonna slide off of that for the moment, because I do want to get a little bit further through this before I have to go to bed.
Makes sense.
Let's see here. It's important to remind people that shorthand exists in gaming lexicon. Yeah, well, nobody... What is this? What do you mean I have to roll attack versus air conditioning? What are you talking about? Let's see here. Yeah, so we have... Yeah, patrons and NPCs are wiped out. Regions are rendered uninhabitable or even too unsafe to travel through as war and magic rip up the campaign map. And this guy says, if you opt to go that route, the implication is that Rube's campaigns, assuming they even run this long, and it's really funny because they had been running for, the Chilmus Valley campaign had been running for about a year when he posted this, will always end in campaign scale war between player groups, which is not true. They don't end in campaign scale war between player groups. That's just the second act. We've gotten there and we've already passed it. Sounds bizarre and artificial, like only being able to build a castle and attract followers at 9th level, regardless of what you've been doing the entire time. That's pretty dumb, man. I feel like you should have talked to somebody about how their campaigns were going. Because all the objections to 1-to-1 time have nothing to do with real campaigns. They're all just things that people advance. Using time jail, would players B and D participate in downtime sessions with characters B and D? If they're going between, like when, using time jail.
Oh, I think I get what he's saying. He's saying that the new players are jumping in and they're not being given those initial 50 days, isn't he?
Yeah.
You join when you join.
Yeah, you join when you join. I think if they were using time jail... No, he's not saying that. Using time jail with players
Okay,
B
then
and
I
D
have no idea what he's
participate.
talking about.
Well, because he's not specifying from which session or like from what day.
Are you talking about the time that passed, like when they were, in time jail? Because if
I
that's
don't
the
know why
case,
he
then
can't just
that's
ask.
downtime.
Yeah, I don't know why he can't just ask, like, hey, if they do 50 days in one session, are they in time jail for 50 days? Like, the answer is just yes. But he's still fishing for. I feel like every time I answer one of these questions, it's comprehensive enough that one, it's really difficult for him to understand, and two, it tends to wipe out whatever gotcha is coming next, so he has to spend like 10 minutes trying to think of another gotcha. I'm sorry, man, but this is what 3 years of discussing the matter and a rather long time in producing a pretty comprehensive and overview, a pretty comprehensive overview of what the procedure and the rule are supposed to do does. Well, man, you're acting like somebody who's trying to fish for gotchas, and you've been pretty clearly doing that throughout the entire time, and you haven't really answered questions, being intentionally vague. Does time jail allow for downtime? Yeah. It allows for downtime. Watch, I'm going to keep my answers short, and then we're going to see where the gotcha comes in. We're going to give him a chance for the killing blow. Let's see here. So, regions are rendered uninhabitable or even too unsafe to travel through? Yeah, so, like, my campaigns don't end in campaign scale war. Like, that's the focus of the campaigns, typically. Does it allow for the 49 days in time jail? I don't think you understand what the time jail procedure is. Go back and watch the video. I don't know why you're the only person in chat pretending to not get this. There are no points to score here in pretending to not get this.
Is he trying to imply that it's the only possible solution to the problem?
I don't even know what he's trying to say here. Oh, during the 49 days, can you do downtime during the 49 days in time jail? The party is in an activity for 49 days, as Crafty Matt has helpfully pointed out. Like they're doing.
I mean,
they're doing dungeon delving.
Is he
and stuff
talking
like
about the
that.
new players? I don't get.
No,
Because the others are
D.
actively inactive. They're doing things during those 49 days.
During B&D, they are like specified to.
The only time
specifically
that it
that
says
they're
in the
adventuring.
example that they're inactive is the 4 days that are given for the example of when you might have to deal with temporal anomaly nonsense from the new players.
Yeah. Alright, so going back here. That brings us to campaign scale. You see, the more game elements are exposed to the It's okay, Crafty. Everybody simmer down. We're going to keep the chat friendly.
I mean, I can only imagine we're talking past each other to some degree.
No, we're not talking past each other. He's just still fishing for gotchas. That's why I said that earlier. Time jail allows for downtime. No, time jail is what happens when you're engaged in an activity and we keep you from doing 2 things at once. Given the concept of downtime, when is that supposed to happen? Given the concept of downtime, when is that supposed to happen? So, let's see here. I'll just give you an example. Sierra's Keep. Mimosa's party meets the Alhoon. Nobody tell them what the name of that creature is yet. They haven't found out yet. An undead mind flayer.
Ooh.
That was cool.
Okay, so Rana's cleanup session start. Cleanup continues on 11/18. And when did they start that? Ooh, let's go with 11/21 session start. 11/22 session start. 11:08, session end. Oh, here's a good example. Okay, so here we go. When is it? They are forward in time, therefore unable to do downtime. Given the concept of downtime, if your character is out of time jail, why would downtime for those specific characters need to be played between sessions? Guys, you're gonna get tripped up. Here it is. Here it is. If your character is out,
They're not between sessions.
that's the thing, is they're
They're
not
just time skipping it.
Well, no, hold on. They are adventuring. Okay, here's an example. 11:21:23 session start. 11:22:23 session start. That's the dungeon crew, right? Those guys took a single day to play. That was one day in game. So they were in time jail from the 8th of this month to the 9th of this month. And then they didn't play again until those specific characters. Yeah, the cleanup. Yeah, we got the dungeon crew was on 11:21 and on 11:22. So they did one day, and then they went back to town, and then they did one day. It wasn't even a full day. And then they went back to town, and they didn't play again from the 8th to the 9th. They were in time jail for one day, and so they had 8 days of free time between the 9th and the 17th. So once you're out of time jail and time is progressing, then those characters can engage in downtime until they play next. Does that make sense? Guys, don't overcomplicate it. Don't overcomplicate it. Don't address it as a real question, except in the most simple, easily understood terms, because you have to address these people as such. You have to address them like you're getting ready to teach them how to play, to take an example out of my ass, Chutes and Ladders. Okay? They can't understand more complex concepts. These are people who thought that BX was advanced.
If you genuinely hold this opinion and are confused about this concept and how it relates to one-to-one time, you don't have to use it. There are alternatives, like Arbiter of Worlds has done an entire video talking about solutions to timekeeping. There are multiple different solutions. You don't have to lock down players for a certain amount of time or anything like that.
You could do it by season. You could do it by month. You could there's conventional.
You can
playing,
simply
which is
cap the
arbitrary.
amount of days that a group can get ahead of time, and then, allow other groups to catch up. There's a lot to it, but at the same time, if you're confused about it, just watch a video about other solutions.
I don't think he's going to understand those either. Well, he might. I don't think that he's going to go from pretending not to understand this one to pretending to understand the other. I think that's where the problem comes in. Erebus, by the way, there's a link in the chat to my Discord. You could just join us and discuss in chat. You could just discuss over voice.
That would be easier.
It would be a lot easier. Why don't you jump in? You're genuinely curious. You've got a lot of questions. It'd be really easy to go over these over voice. Why don't you click the link under the video and then join the Discord?
So what was the next point on your list?
Yeah, let's move on to this one. Here we go. That brings us to campaign scale. The more game elements are exposed to the ravages of time, the more incentives players have to fortify their position in the campaign. This guy says this doesn't follow. First off, by tracking time, normally things are still exposed to the ravages of time. That's not true, because people tend to time skip in an arbitrary fashion, and time skipping in an arbitrary fashion produces really wildly negative outcomes by DM fiat. So the DM response is to then pull back and stop doing arbitrary time skips. And most people, as this guy himself admits, just pick up whenever the last session ended. And you could say, well, look, like 3 days passed between sessions 1, 2, and 3, so that's time. That's a campaign that's exposed to the ravages of time. And I would say, well, not in the same way certainly not in the same way that if somebody plays once a month and they use pause time, then across 3 months they've moved forward 30 days, and across 3 months my campaign has moved forward 90 days. And so because my campaign has moved forward 90 days, that means events that take time can actually take place. So no, pause time, tracking time normally, no, that doesn't just expose things to the ravages of time. You have to get over a certain threshold of time passing. So maybe use 1 to 5, maybe use 1 to 1, maybe you base it off the seasons or the end of the month and say everything catches up to this date. There's a lot of different ways to do it, as Hoisty mentioned earlier, but just pausing it doesn't accomplish that at all. It's just wrong and stupid. Let's see here.
And it breaks other rules in the DMG, but most people don't
worse.
use those rules anyway.
Which is unfortunate. There's a lot of cool stuff to work with.
People wouldn't just be interested in it as a concept. I mean, it adds pressure to the game. You constantly have to worry about that, end of the month upkeep coming up, and there's things constantly moving. It makes it a lot more interesting and dynamic. I just for that, I don't see why people are so against it.
I think that they know that they're bad. I think that the idea that somebody found something that wasn't like a new NPC class or homebrew monster or lore of the world is that actually changes the game is really sticks in the old guard's craw, because it's like, God, first of all, how did we miss something so obvious? And second of all, we've never done anything that changes a campaign to this scale. So it's just rank jealousy. Rube said it's not in the manual, but can be interpreted thus. Let's see here. What are you talking about? I said that time jail isn't in the manual, but 1-to-1 time is in the manual, and downtime is in the manual. Downtime is described as an activity on pages that we mentioned beforehand, so I don't know what you're referring to there. Let's see here.
I'm gonna head off. It's
All right.
1:30 in the morning here.
Oh,
Have a
shoot.
good
I'll see you
one,
later,
guys.
man. Obviously, it was always nice talking with you.
Yeah, it's always awesome to chat with you. Well, have a good one.
See you later, buddy. I saw that Quantum Wings just joined in the Discord. It's nice to meet you. Let's see here. Those activities can be played in-game. Yeah, sure they can. They could also be played out of game, because there's no prescription or restriction on whether you have to do it in-game or out of game, which means that you can do it wherever you like, or whenever you like. Let's see here. Towns and keeps will fall according to campaign events. The players must erect towns and keeps of their own if they wish to secure access to markets and traders. More gamist wargame crap? Maybe Rube is referring to another game entirely. Maybe he thinks that AD&D is a war game? That's a little weird.
We back to this.
Yeah. It's not in the effing manual. No, man. It takes 2 to 8 days to do hiring for it takes 2 to 8 days for hirelings and henchmen to get to the player character. So it's in the manual. And if you want to deny that, that's fine. You could do it on a different channel. But it's in the book. We've quoted you the exact page and the exact quote. And we've gone over it about 60 different times.
The
So you
real
could just
question, I think,
go
is, sure, some of a lot of these downtime activities can be covered in the game, but why would you want to burn a whole bunch of session time on not adventure, not delving, when there's plenty of ways to handle that outside of the game?
Erebus, why does it where does it say, and you can't answer this because we've already given you the exact quote, it doesn't say that you have to play it in-game. Whether you can play it in-game is completely irrelevant. Does it say that player A goes off to meet with the Oracle during the session? It might.
Like
Is it something that has to be done in-game?
My players don't want me to sit there and roll 11 days of travel encounters for the one guy that goes off to meet an oracle while they just do nothing.
Mm-hmm. This guy is really mad that we do shopping between sessions. Maybe that's why he got mad earlier. Okay, alright. I'm going to ban him now because he's denying that. Alright, sorry dude, we already quoted you the exact we gave you the exact example of here's something that can be done during a downtime action. And players can choose to do that in-game or not in-game. And you said, well, it's not in the rules. Okay. I'm sorry, man.
It's a waste of the time, not a waste of the game.
Exactly. No, getting yeah, you're free to come back and you're free to chat in-game if you'd like. Another straw man. Hey, man, you're the one who told us that it's not in the rule books. I saw the message exactly. You're welcome to come in and chat over voice if you think that I've done something to... if you think I've done something to mess up your description, just jump into that link. It's right under the channel. Super easy to join. Just and we're in the general chat in my Discord. Come on in. Takes 2 seconds. Anyways. Okay, so as if equipment and supplies just spring up in a town as opposed to goods and or materials coming from somewhere else. No, that's what building a town is for. Because when you build a town, then people come to the town because you have like shelter that you can make use of. And if you can make use of shelter, and there's, I mean, if you've taken care of people's basic needs, maybe it's at an important crossroads, maybe here's a pretty good example, maybe you repair a ruined keep, and so a bunch of peasants go, oh shoot, not only are the orcs that were harassing us no longer around, there's this keep next to us, so that whatever comes to harass us next, we've got a lord to defend us. Let's go give that guy food so he keeps us safe. That's kind of the gameplay dynamic that's erupting here, and you would know that if you played AD&D or really any game that was more complex than Monopoly. No, that's a bad example. I don't know if this guy would get Monopoly. All reliable, shoots and ladders. I don't think this guy would, if this guy's struggling with shoots and ladders, I don't think that he could get AD and tic-tac-toe. That's a bit too gamist for him. Let's see here. Then you have to pay an NPC to train you to do what your class does in order to level up. This is one way that you know Gygax never intended it to work this way. Imagine playing by Broasaur tourist whims and somehow clawing your way to 9th level. You don't arbitrarily get picked off in the wilds or dungeon because you managed to avoid ending a session there. You don't starve to death in town because you made sure you were lugging a month's supply of food and water at all times. You finally did it. 9th level, Candyland. Oh god, you're right, Candyland is the best example. You finally did it, 9th level. It's time to build a castle. Why is he saying that we have to wait until 9th level to build a castle? What kind of idiot assumes that? What kind of stupid person who's never engaged with the game, never engaged with us, isn't thinking about the game and is just kind of like moving words around? Man, do your players wait until 9th level to get into the domain game? Mine don't. Mine never did. I think we started a 5e game at 3rd level. I think the first West Marches we started was a 3rd level start. And the very first session that we did was going into was going west from the starting town and where like an old water mill was, because the person wanted to set up a gun mill. And they found where the where the water had been blocked off, and there were a bunch of nasty natural creatures inside, and they built up that gun mill, and that thing thing became a staple of the campaign for like the next four seasons of those West Marches, like the next 4 years. Was using that gun mill. The very third level, the very first thing that they did was they went out and said, all right, there's a ruin over here. We're going to clear it out. We're going to hire some laborers. We're bringing some engineers along, and we're going to repair this thing. We're going to spend the money to fix a ruined establishment, keep, fortification, whatever, because it doesn't have to take a year and a half. Time to build a castle and cement your imaginary character's legacy in an imaginary world that doesn't even matter because it's just a game. Well, man, you seem to be really mad about the whole game thing, like 2 paragraphs up. No wonder you're so mad whenever we talk about winning the game. Oh, goodness. Yeah, Gary was pretty clear on the whole training thing. We don't have to worry about this. A small castle, and there was a show on this recently, I hear. A small castle will not be done for, on average, over a year and a half. So you have to stay at it in real time for about that long. Or mostly real time, as the Broas Arcturus aren't clear on if you can skip time during actual play. We're pretty clear on whether you could skip time during actual play, because the whole idea is 1 day in real life equals 1 day in game between sessions when no play is happening. I have no clue how in Rube's world you run a campaign going around erecting towns and keeps when you'll have to start that and it won't get done for years if it gets done at all. Imagine pissing away years of your life. Oh, this is awful. Hoarding imaginary money and making imaginary towns and keeps only to have an NPC show up out of nowhere and just wipe it all out. While this can happen in a normal game, it just won't feel as big of a waste if the DM skips through months of imaginary castle construction time. Well, you could do that, but you're also going to skip through destroying that castle or not do it at all. So either the player doesn't get to defend their fortification or they don't get to build it at all. Or they don't get to build it at all, or it gets destroyed by DM fiat, and none of those are optimal. Let's see here. So again, the setup of the rules is that you take a shortcut first because things take so long. You have a lot of rules and procedures for how to deal with doing something from the ground up, and those are important and they're relevant. But because it takes so long to do from the ground up, you have a better incentive to take a shortcut first and then return to the ground up thing to deal with the consequences of taking the shortcut. So an example from the Roll and Bones show the other night is that, let's see here, is that you clear out a ruin, you repair a ruin, and repairing the ruin takes way less time than building a castle from the ground up. You have fortifications. The problem is, all the peasants are running over. 2 other lords on the map find out that there's a new guy in town, and they say, we're not doing this. They were warring with one another, now they're turning their gaze towards the player character. And the player character says, shoot, well, I have this keep here, but I don't want to just let them besiege me. I want to stall these guys. I want to see if I can take out some forces beforehand. I don't have enough troops to fight them one-on-one. What can I do? And that's where a wooden palisade or a bunker at select locations, at strategic locations throughout the map, are going to work out nicely for you. So that's where you return to the ground level. But they're not, because those ground level fortifications, because they won't be built in time to completely stop the enemy forces, probably, then they don't replace or obviate the need for the keep. They're just built because you could build a wooden palisade in like 15 days, and it's a pretty low gold cost to have like slits that your archers can fire through. That's pretty easy. Let's say that you leave some traps behind in the palisade. That's pretty cool. And that's going to take out some troops and let your guys engage in some guerrilla warfare so that by the time the armies do make it to your keep, you've had time to wear down the enemy, and now your keep and the forces within are a match for the sieging army. So you have this loop of like, I got in over my head, and now I need to return to, and that's given me a new I took a shortcut, but the shortcut has given me new problems. So I have to go back to the baseline, and once I've gone back to baseline and worked with some of these materials to buy me some extra time, I can compensate for the new problem, and now my shortcut no longer has brought me behind. Now I'm back, now I'm keeping pace with the problems that my shortcut brought me. But there was a moment, it's not the same as just the shortcut working as normal, right? Because there's a moment of tension and different decisions that you can make, and you have to play well in the context. You get to the shortcut, you get a big problem that your shortcut's not prepared to deal with, and you're not prepared to deal with. But if you play your cards right, you can recover the value of that shortcut through mastery of the rules. And that's a different gameplay dynamic than the shortcut just working out for you or just skipping ahead to success, right? A game in which you take a shortcut from first level to fourth level in the dungeon and then rely on system mastery to keep yourself from dying on the fourth level of the dungeon, or your trek backwards, is not the same as skipping to fourth level of the dungeon and then skipping back to where you get the then skipping back to the entrance. These are two different gameplay dynamics, because one has a loop and peaks and valleys and opportunities for the players to make decisions that will make or break their rate of survival, their rate of success, and their decisions and assets going forward. And the other just kind of skips all that material, which is a shame because it's a really fun gameplay dynamic, and skipping it doesn't get you that gameplay dynamic. This is a little bit too complex for most people in the OSR to imagine. I think there's a complexity to it that they can't really manage. Alright, here's the last one that we're going to do for the night, then I'm off. Towns and keeps require carpenters, stonemasons, miners, farmers, and blacksmiths to build and maintain. They require, this guy says sure, he doesn't have a problem with that. Keep in mind, towns and keeps require carpenters, stonemasons, miners, farmers, and blacksmiths. They require mages and men-at-arms to keep safe. This guy says, if every place in the world requires these specific things, then how would anything function? How would farms not be completely... Now, notice, farms were not included in towns and keeps, but here we go. How would farms not be completely overrun and wiped out, since they're not all clustered together within a wall, or have ready access to fighters and wizards? What specific powers does a mage possess that are so necessary to overcome typical threats, as most monsters are vulnerable to normal weapons? Well, the most where should we start here?
The rules in the AD&D rulebook kind of imply this as well.
The fact that you could buy men-at-arms in pretty much any town that you go to?
I mean, there's entirely separate roles for inhabited versus uninhabited areas. And so what the implication kind of is that as they carve out, civilization and build these places up when they're protected by men, then you have these established nodes where they travel back and forth and patrol and keep those things at bay.
And then
so
at some point,
presence of men at arms and towns and all that stuff.
And specifically ruined towns. The implication is that these places were destroyed. These places were overrun and wiped out. This guy's blog name... Hold on a second. Hold on. Isn't this guy's blog name Points of Light? Where did I see that? Awful Good Games? That's not it. Taking the class out of Classic D20 Mechanics, Bugbear, Incrementing Initiative. This is all useless crap. what was it? Oh wait, no. Points of his blog, for some reason it's not his title, but if you look up in the tab here, his blog name is literally Points of Light. Does he not know what that term comes from? The whole idea of a points of light setting is a world bathed in darkness, and you have a few places that have just barely managed to evade, getting completely overrun, and the only people who can go outside the walls and reliably not die are adventurers. That's the entire point of... Why did you name your... Maybe it's an SEO marketing thing that he did. Oh, that's really embarrassing. Man, if you don't know what the blog... If you name your blog Points of Light and you don't know what that phrase comes from, I'm sorry. No wonder you're having issues with this. They require mages and men-at-arms to keep safe. Yeah, so we know that men-at-arms are needed. I'm also going to focus here. How would farms not be completely overrun and wiped out? Well, farms, generally speaking, in real life, were built around forts and city-states. The concept of a city-state was that, like, it was a place that was fortified, and then there would be farmland outside of it. And because you only needed a certain number of people to tend to that farmland, they could make use of it, they could draw it into town, and if an emergency came up, like if troops came in to besiege the town, then the farmers would gather up as much food and stuff as they could, they would bring it into the town, and then they would try to wait out the siege until it broke, or they were able to muster a fighting force that was superior to the siege, or something like that. Or the sieging people left. So the entire structure of towns and city-states in real life was to have farms directly outside of the walls. Because then you didn't need as much material for the walls, because you could just bring the farmers in. You didn't need that many farmers. You could just bring the farmers in when they finished up, if you needed to defend them. And if and when those farmers died, you could send out other people who were relatively qualified to be farmers out to take over those farms, because they were outside the walls. And maybe you burned the crops as you retreated or went through the land, because you didn't want the attacking army to be able to make use of those crops. That's just like history.
If you look at it, if you're doing about history and like medieval statistics and demographics and stuff like that, it's actually a lot of like the smaller farming communities that weren't immediately around cities, like large settlements, they were typically like within a day's walk of it. So it'd still be pretty easily enforceable, because you know you in a lot of cases, if they were moving in, they'd have decent enough time to react. Once word gets out, they'd send a runner. But in a lot of those communities were within like 10 miles.
The British are coming. It's just that the British are coming. That's all. Oh man. As far as like ready access to fighters and wizards, again, men-at-arms are in the place. As helpfully pointed out, Brian Renneker said the rules for populating castles often result in both fighters and magic users, and clerics as well. What specific powers does a mage possess that are necessary to overcome typical threats? Well, I didn't say necessary. I said mages and men-at-arms. Mages and men-at-arms. Perhaps something that a mage might be effective at.
Has this guy looked at a spell list before?
I don't think he has, but I'm going to point out to him the humble magic missile, which literally exists as a tool of assassination. What specific powers does a mage possess that are necessary to overcome typical threats, as most monsters are vulnerable to normal weapons? Well, here's the problem. There might be a wizard coming along with the army that's coming to kill you. So maybe, in order to keep, even if you're not going to have those two wizards duel, maybe just to keep the balance of power even, is you have your own guy who can cast Fireball. If you have 10 units, and the enemy has 10 units, but the enemy has one guy who can cast Fireball, and wipe out one of your units, then you're at a disadvantage. So you want a mage of your own so that you could keep things even. And if the enemy army attacking doesn't have a mage of their own and they don't have somebody who can cast Fireball, then this guy over here can cast Fireball. Oh, now you're at an advantage. This is aside from the, I know that most monsters have the capacity, are vulnerable to normal weapons. The problem is the ones that aren't vulnerable to normal weapons can tear through as many people as they want unless dealt with through magic or magic weapons. So it would be reasonable that if you don't want, like, okay, maybe an Anke kills one farmer and that's a tragedy, but you keep a wizard on hand to make sure that a lycanthrope doesn't kill all of your farmers. Let's see here. It makes more sense to assume that monsters aren't lurking everywhere. That's stupid. That's dumb. You're running a blog called Points of Light. I know that you don't know what these words mean, but the entire theme behind the Points of Light setting is that the place outside civilization, it's civilization versus the wilderness. Wilderness is dangerous, and civilization exists in tension, opposition, defiance of wilderness, and has to maintain its presence pretty rigorously if it wants to remain and not get turned into wilderness. Let's see here. More dangerous world, people are more prepared and capable of defending themselves. Yes, they're called men-at-arms, as opposed to having to pay God knows how much every week or month to have a bunch of wizards and warriors on tap. Well, actually, we do know how much it costs to have warriors on tap. Men-at-arms are like 1 gold piece a day. They're 1 gold piece a day, but you have to equip them. So it's not really God knows how much. It's listed right next to their thing. You pay, it's 1 gold piece a day. It's 1 gold piece a day. It's not God knows it. It's 1 gold piece a day. It's 1 gold piece a day, and if you kill a bunch of things, like kill people with your men-at-arms, you can equip them with loot from whatever bandits or orcs you just killed. It's 1 gold piece a day. It's 1 gold piece a day. God knows how much every week. It's 1 gold piece a day. 1 gold piece per person per day.
Also, the people don't have to be prepared for that kind of stuff because it's a feudal setting where the kings are the ones, like the kings and faction leaders are the ones who have the wizards and warriors on tap. They have the money to do that.
Yeah. So if they hear about like a lycanthrope out in the town that's like, maybe it's not adjacent to the city-state, but it's a day's walk. If a runner comes and says, hey, there's a lycanthrope tearing things up, then he's going to send paladins out and they're going to hopefully fix it the next day. That's kind of the idea, I think, between a lot of the adventuring that your party is going to do. Like, I don't know if this guy's heard of getting a quest before, but that's kind of the idea, is that somebody else has a problem or wants something done, so they call up some adventurers who are suited to do it. So whatever loot, as opposed to having to pay God knows how much every week or month for, well, if you pay a bunch of adventurers to do it, if you've ever run a quest before, I don't know if you've run a game before, David Guile, very appropriately named. That's how you make fun of somebody's name, David Guile. What's the definition of guile? Liar, somebody who can't be trusted, somebody just spitting venom and having nothing. Guile, David Guile. Very good name. How much, God knows how much, how every week or month you have to pay a bunch of people. It's whatever you maybe, if you ran a single session, then you would have an idea of what the money for player characters might be. They require adventurers to give, they require adventurers to bring gold and prestige to their tiny slice of land. This is even worse than the mages and men-at-arms like. In Broasar Tourist World, adventurers run the economy.
These are just issues he has with the game itself.
This is just issues that he has with the game itself. I don't know about running the economy. They contribute to the economy a lot. If you don't adventure and bring back gold, everything will collapse. So how did anything function before the adventurers cropped up? What? No, it's to bring gold and prestige to the tiny slice of land. The idea behind this line is that the adventurers are making an investment to recover lost ground. If you don't adventure and bring back gold, everything will collapse. Is that implied by that statement, do you think? I'm willing to hear a yes, by the way. That's not a rhetorical question. I don't know. I don't know what was communicated to this person.
There are other adventuring parties out there. The world is basically as it was and will be whether or not the players do it. That's just the way the rules are.
Yeah, the assumption is that places get overrun, they get destroyed, adventurers come in, they revitalize the land, other people move in because it's safe there, and then the adventurers leave, and then maybe it turns into a functioning city-state, or maybe it doesn't. Maybe it does get overrun by faction mechanics. That's the game. That's what's implied by finding ruins everywhere and uninhabited settlements and dungeons, is that, yeah, a lot of people do starve and die off, but it's not because they're too dumb to have a functioning economy without dungeon gold. The idea is that people get maybe kidnapped from, maybe they're like replaced by pod people, maybe it's maybe they get replaced by pod people, maybe they get corrupted by vampires, maybe a necromancer comes in and kills everybody and turns, because he needs a zombie army, so he swings by the graveyard and says, I could do with about twice as many, and turns to the living population and says, that'll do. That's kind of the idea, is that if you don't have, people can survive for a while without effective defenders, and sometimes forces that are beyond those defenders come along, and if the adventurers aren't there to stop them, then yeah, they can die. Lots of settlements throughout history got wiped out because they didn't have enough defenders to handle doom stacks moving around the map of Europe or the Middle East, or Middle East and North Africa, Fertile Crescent, like whatever you want to do. Which in turn attracts the attention of movers and shakers of the campaign map. That's kind of the whole idea. Oh, so I literally did explain it in the next line. Was, yeah, without any context or examples. No, I explained it. Yeah. Hey, if there's a bunch of gold coming to one place, then some big bad evil guys are going to want to move in. And some big bad good guys or some big bad neutral guys are going to want to protect it and make friends with that settlement, take advantage of that place, and they're going to fight with the big bad evil guys over that.
Wonder of wonders.
I imagine that if characters become noteworthy, that someone may pay attention. Let's see here. But since Rube's games apparently take place in a purely gamist wargame world with perhaps a few fantasy role-playing trappings layered on top, I'm guessing that at tourist tables, even with context, it still wouldn't make any fucking sense. Okay. So a settlement that has a lot of gold to it, it wouldn't make sense to capture a settlement with a lot of gold in it in a war game. I'll just leave it there, I guess. It doesn't make sense that to pay attention from a role-playing perspective. It's ambiguous as to whether it makes sense for faction leaders to take note of a new town with a lot of money and magic items flowing into it. But in a war game, it definitely doesn't make sense to pay attention to a new town and new faction with a sudden influx of coin and magic items and troops and wizards. I guess All right. I wonder what does make sense to this person. That's all I can respond with. I wonder what does make sense to this person. Thanks for chilling out with me, folks, for way too long. It's been 3 hours. I do have to go to work in the morning for a short shift, so it'll be fine. But I should get to sleep, and I think I think there's a girl in the other room in desperate need of massage. So I'm gonna head off. Thank you to everybody who joined in tonight, but especially those of you in chat. Chiza, Hoistine, Merv, so Hufos, who plays Mervna, matron of House Marta in my campaign. Always happy to have y'all around. And thank you to everybody who showed up in chat. Let's see here. Hellfinder General says, Gamus is such a stupid term. He's correct. Alright, I'm off to bed, says Crafty. Thanks for showing up, buddy. Thanks for the laughs. Remember, in order to be the best there is, the best there was, the best there will ever be, you need to read the effing rules. Yes. Alright, so thank you, everybody. This was a lot of fun.
We'll just have to get to the rest of it next time.
Yeah, how far did I make it?
Halfway, it looks like.
Oh, man. Oh,
Content.
Whoa, we didn't even get halfway down. Oh, man. Oh, we're gonna have to block that Erebus guy's account
The very next
sooner.
section was the one he said he was waiting for.
Yeah, alright, that seems pretty tempting. Safer Seas are here. What is this? Alright, I've been tagged on Twitter. Oh, this is so much fun. Alright. I'll see y'all later, folks. This is a lot of fun. Goodbye.